аванти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1021 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again, and we literally have news from around the world today. China is surrounding Taiwan. We also see Israel destroying Syria's entire military, and also Russia's giving fighter jets to North Korea for the first time, and we have all that news to cover today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we've been getting major developments over the past 48 hours that inside of the area of the Taiwan Strait, the Chinese Navy is entirely circling the island of Taiwan in a war game that is simulating a naval blockade of the island. The situation is diplomatically so serious that the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan is taking necessary military precautions to prepare for a possible assault by the People's Republic of China, conducting armed readiness drills and military preparedness drills throughout the entirety of the island's key defense points to defend themselves from a mainland Chinese attack that may potentially happen as a result of continued provocations through the unscheduled war games. Meanwhile, outside the area, we were able to hear that just about 1,000 miles away on the island of Guam, the United States of America and the armed forces of the Republic were able to achieve a major victory today, as the first successful ballistic missile interception test has been conducted at the Aegis Ashore system on Guam, and the system was able to shoot down a medium-range ballistic missile in its mid-course phase, the first time ever that such a thing has been conducted by a ballistic missile interceptor such as the Aegis Ashore, and a major success not only for this republic, but for the Western world at large. Meanwhile, inside of South Korea, we have also been able to see that while the impeachment news has started to go on the back burner for the large part, at least within the Republic of Korea, as my throat imploded right there for a brief moment, we were able to see that the South Koreans are testing their first laser-based system, or a directed energy weapon. It appears that the system is now ready to be introduced into mass service, this, and we have heard that there is a large plan to introduce these to the skyscrapers of Seoul to prepare for any kind of artillery interventions that need to be conducted or artillery defenses against the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. Meanwhile,
rumor has it this is the South Korean president's like peace offering for the whole thing he did with the martial law situation. So there you go. I hope that makes up for it.
He said, you received directed energy weapon, I received failed coup attempt. And it was a great trade. Like, it was the best trade, a trade you have never seen before. But moving on up to the other side of the DMZ, we were also able to hear that North Korea is apparently getting new aircraft from the Russians in the form of MiG-29s and Su-27s by using their own people as currency, trading them with the Russians like Pokemon cards. Meanwhile, outside of the Korean Peninsula and inside the Middle East, we were able to hear that one of the largest air operations in Israeli history was conducted against the brand new Syrian Republic, as we were able to hear that 250 targets were individually bombed last night in Israeli airstrike, attempting to destroy a large amount of the Syrians' naval, air, and ground capabilities. It appears that the airstrikes were a major success, and we have not seen a response from rebel forces at this point. However, the rebel forces are finally starting to create what appears to be some version of peace and tranquility within the area of Syria, as we have been able to hear that rebel forces have withdrawn from all of the major cities today, once again returning the day-to-day administration of law and order within the major cities of Syria back to the local authorities and the local police of the Syrian Republic. We have also been able to hear that the interim government has been formed today, and they have already made a massive bombshell announcement showing that the nation is moving in a more democratic light, as the interim government has announced that they are going to be moving in the direction of a free market economy, a major keystone to any nation that will start to move in a very pro-Western direction. Meanwhile, outside of Syria, we have been able to hear that the Israeli ground incursion has continued into Syria, and it does appear that while at the moment there is a decent justification for the ground incursion by the Israelis, it is creating a great deal of diplomatic strife in between them and the Turkish Republic, as President Erdogan has stated today that Syrian land belongs to Syrian people, and has even directly stated that the Turkish armed forces may get directly involved in the defense of the fledgling Syrian Republic against an Israeli ground incursion within the southern area of the country. Outside of the Middle East, we've also been able to hear that inside of Eastern Europe, the dictator of Belarus, Lukashenko, has declared that the Russian Federation has actually not only put nuclear weapons on the territory of Belarus, but once again has asserted that these nuclear weapons are actually under the control of the Republic of Belarus, once again making it very clear that this is a blatant violation of the nuclear non-proliferation treaties that all signers agreed that they were not going to allow other nations beyond the signing parties to receive or operate nuclear weapons or develop any outside of the treaty. We have also been able to hear that on the front lines of Ukraine, Ukrainian armed forces have been fighting heroically over the past 48 hours to hold the front lines against the ongoing Russian onslaught. The Russians, taking very high casualties, have been unable to secure any major frontline areas, and once again, the front line is largely stagnant, while being an absolute hailstorm of battles raging from tip to stern. But nevertheless, we have loads of news to cover today from quite literally every single corner of the world. And these are the major news stories that we are able to cover. Many of y'all will know that we have heard some major news today out of Myanmar, inside of the area of Southeastern Asia. And we have also been able to hear some major events inside of the Sudanese civil war as well. Unfortunately, we do not cover those here on the channel, but nevertheless, the crazy thing is that there is a war raging on literally every single continent at this moment in the world, except for North America and Oceania. Every single area of the world currently has an ongoing and active conflict in it somewhere, some way, and we are going to be getting into the news of what exactly is happening in each and every single one of these distinct areas, and what is probably going to be going on into the near future. But moving on into the area of the Taiwan Strait, we were able to hear today that the People's Liberation Army Navy of the People's Republic of China is once again conducting a major war game and a naval blockade of the the Republic of China. I'm just going to call them Taiwan and China from here forward, because for some reason tonight I'm getting those really mixed up. But nevertheless, China's military activity has formed two walls east of Taiwan that aim to secure control of the Taiwan Strait and block the access of other countries. countries, according to reports that we've been able to get about the ongoing actions of the People's Liberation Army Navy. We have also been able to hear that they have been joined by a large presence of the People's Liberation Army Air Force, which apparently 47 aircraft have been involved in the exercise that has been conducted today. Apparently, according to what we have heard from the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan, the war games that the Communist Chinese are conducting near the island are some of the largest that have been seen since 1996 in terms of number, with an incredibly large amount of vessels and aircraft involved in the current war game at this time. It is a very concerning situation, as the People's Liberation Army Navy has largely set up two entirely separate fleets that are meant to, in the instance of a war, blockade Taiwan from any foreign assistance or any access to the outside world. We generally understand that the fleets are arranged in a layout that heavily resembles these lines that I'm showing y'all right here. And these are a very scary sort of a maneuver being conducted by the People's Liberation Army Navy. As you can see, it generally creates a catch net around the entirety of eastern Taiwan facing towards the Pacific. The United States forces, such as the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Army, would have to be coming from a direction such as the island of Guam or from one of the bases in the Philippines. By largely creating this naval perimeter on the Pacific coast of Taiwan, they are able to ensure that U.S. and Western support is unable to arrive to Taiwan, while Taiwanese vessels are unable to break into the open sea of the Pacific and attempt to resupply the Taiwanese nation from U.S. or Western-based ports elsewhere within the region. This war game is probably one of the most concerning that we've seen recently because of the implications that it is giving not only to the Taiwanese, but to the United States. In previous war games that have been conducted over the past few years, usually the joint sword military exercises, the People's Liberation Army and its forces largely are consisting of military actions that directly surround the island of Taiwan itself and are meant to really scare the Taiwanese into trying to get into some sort of an arrangement with a one China, two systems sort of a model that the Chinese have imposed on Hong Kong and Macau in the past. While that has been the case, and the threats have largely been directed towards Taiwan, this is the first time that we've seen a naval blockade that not only threatens Taiwan directly once again, but is starting to send a stronger message to Western nations, such as the United States of America, within this area. This blockade is not only meant to strike fear in the Republic of China's government on the Taiwanese island, it is also supposed to send a very strong message to the United States of America, showing that the People's Liberation Army Navy is entirely capable of cutting off Taiwan from U.S. intervention and support before the United States can even directly get involved in the defense of the island nation. This is something that is incredibly serious, and it is starting to give us an idea that if this was to break out, the United States might actually have to punch through the Chinese blockade to open up shipping lanes to Taiwan for them to be able to continue to keep their war machine running if conflict was to break out. And the Taiwanese
I think honestly, like the bigger question than that would be, would the U.S. actually punch through to defend Taiwan, or would we pretty much leave them to be taken over by the Chinese? Would we actually intervene? Because I think right now it's kind of unknown.
It is a little unknown at the moment for the large part. A lot of the United States government does view it as an imperative to defend Taiwan at the moment, but we don't really know how big of an imperative or how important that is to the United States government at this moment. We were able to see, however, that the Republic of China's government is taking the situation so seriously that they are now conducting war readiness drills at key defensive positions along the entirety of the Republic of China's territory. According to a direct statement that we were able to get today from Taipei on the 9th of December, which was at midnight, which over there would have been just a little while ago, about 16 hours ago, Taiwan's military on Monday initiated war preparedness drills after Chinese warships and Coast Guard vessels entered the Taiwan Strait and West Pacific for long-distance missions. In a statement, the Ministry of National Defense of Taiwan said that in addition to maneuvers, the People's Liberation Army had designated 7 areas east of the coastal Zhejiang and Fujian provinces as temporary reserved airspaces until Wednesday. These areas are directly along the Chinese coast and once again really create the net that will trap Taiwan pretty much onto its own and isolate it if a conflict was to break out. Such areas typically refer to airspace temporarily reserved and allocated for the exclusive use of specific users during a determined period of time. The PLA has designated 7 reserved airspaces along those regions, according to the Republic of China's armed forces, and have identified the PLA Eastern, Northern, and Southern TC sea naval formations, along with Coast Guard vessels, entering areas around the Taiwan Strait and the Western Pacific, according to the Ministry of National Defense. In response, the MND, which stands for Ministry of National Defense, said it had initiated war preparedness drills at strategic locations nationwide and was working closely with the Coast Guard administration on appropriate countermeasures. Security officials quoted by local and foreign media have suggested that China is preparing to launch military exercises following U.S. stopovers made by President Lai Ching-te of Taiwan during a recently concluded tour of Taiwan's South Pacific allies. It does appear that the diplomatic situation is starting to become very serious again around the area. The Chinese may be seriously considering some sort of a severe and provocative action against the Republic of China here in the near future. That action would most likely be a direct armed action against the island. This sort of a maneuver is a very threatening one, and while we do see that Operation Joint Sword exercises do occur quite often, this is a direct threat, like I was saying earlier, not just to Taiwan, but to the Western world as a whole, and especially to U.S. support of Taiwan, possibly trying to send the message to us that it would be far more difficult to break through to Taiwan than it would be to defend them and stop the conflict from breaking out in the first place, really giving the Chinese the upper hand advantage, at least when speaking particularly about this scenario. It is one that we have to tread a little bit cautiously on, as any of these war games could be a ruse to immediately kick off some sort of an armed assault against the island of Taiwan and catch them while they're not expecting an armed conflict. War games like these always appear to be a lot more mundane than a lot of people would expect, but the idea behind war games, especially ones like these, is that they're supposed to be directly threatening that by putting their armed forces in this position, a war could begin at any moment and the Taiwanese would practically be screwed from that point forward, and the United States would pretty much be caught with their hands tied behind their back on trying to find a way to actually support the Taiwanese in that armed conflict without going into a direct war with China as a result. It does appear...
And also, we can't just write off the military exercises whatsoever, because remember, the Ukraine war started with quote-unquote Russian military exercises around the borders of Ukraine, and look what that turned into. And pretty much every military expert out there was saying, no, there's no way that these exercises can turn into a full-blown invasion. That would be insanity. But yet, here we are, Ukraine war going on for several years now, so, you know, you never know. Like, this could be the real deal, or it might just be a drill. It's just hard to tell.
It is really hard to tell, and a lot of people have been putting in their 2 cents on what the Chinese are doing at this moment. And it looks as though a lot of people are saying that this is still low-level coercion, trying to threaten the Taiwanese and trying to take a diplomatic settlement to the issue of Taiwanese independence, while others seem to be saying that China may be eyeballing an invasion plan of the island of Taiwan here very soon. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that this is more so another attempt at low-level coercion by the Chinese, a tried-and-true diplomatic tactic that they've been using for decades at this point, or do you think that they're actually starting to eyeball an invasion considering the severity of the maneuvers that have been conducted in today's war games?
So it looks like 42% of the audience said it seems like that China is trying to intimidate Taiwan, not really invade it right now, but simply intimidate them, while 32% said yes, China will invade very soon, and soon being kind of ambiguous, and 17% said no, China is just practicing drills for their military. And I would say, with this being the largest one since 1996, over several decades now, I would say that there probably is something more to this one. Either China is trying to intimidate Taiwan into basically starting to negotiate away their rights and their territory, which is obviously not going to happen, but that might be the Chinese objective. Or actually, they might be planning on actually invading the country in a surprise attack. It could be that as well. I'll be honest, I'm really not sure right now. I'm really not getting a gut feeling on this one like I did with the Ukraine situation. And that's not very scientific, but I'm really not seeing like this being very likely at the moment, in my honest opinion. So I'm going to have to be undecided, but I'm kind of in between options 1 and 3. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm 100% with the 42%, that while this is a very serious instance and we need to take this, really ramp this up to at least 50 on a diplomatic scale, they are largely attempting to intimidate the Taiwanese and the United States by this action. I do not believe that for a minute the People's Republic of China is ready to go to war with Taiwan just yet. They still lack the prerequisite amphibious landing ships and also really the ability to be able to conduct a large enough armed invasion on the ground of Taiwan to be able to take the island over. I just think that that is a certainty at this point, because even the People's Republic of China is admitting that their navy has to be far larger to be able to conduct an amphibious landing, which really puts the timetable of an invasion of Taiwan being successful sometime near 2029 to 2031, by the time the Chinese Navy is actually to be ready to be able to conduct this sort of action and land the PLA on the island. For this reason, I still think that this is a threatening maneuver, really meant to intimidate everyone, but it is one that we do have to take seriously. This kind of a maneuver is showing us quite easily what the Chinese might be able to do to isolate the Taiwanese and turn this into a war that is pretty one-sided. Taiwan would be able to defend itself for some time, but with a complete lack of an ability to support the island militarily with any kind of arms or equipment or even direct armed action without having to face down the Chinese Navy directly, the situation on the island of Taiwan would be a very precarious one in a defensive sort of a strategy, and would be really hard to implement over the long term, meaning that the Chinese would be able to largely overwhelm the island over a course of probably 6 months to a year, and eventually land on the island, taking the entirety of Taiwan very easily and forcefully reintegrating it into the People's Republic of China. For this reason, I do believe that while invasion is not coming yet because of this action, the United States needs to be proactive and make sure that the Chinese start to back off once more. There is a United States carrier strike group that is permanently stationed in the area of Japan and South Korea, which could be brought down very quickly to start giving the Chinese a little bit of an idea that while they might be able to blockade the island navally, there would already be a almost near immediate response by the United States Armed Forces to break this blockade and continue to open up shipping channels from the island of Taiwan and out into the greater Pacific. I also believe that it would be important to once again reaffirm our commitments to defense of Taiwan and start to provide more arms and equipment in the short while that would be in the anti-ship and anti-air categories, as these would be the most important elements that would be needed to fight against the People's Republic of China at the very beginning of an armed conflict. These actions...
And also enforce it would probably be very prudent for the U.S. to actually decide to get involved and reaffirm our commitment to Taiwan, because like many people have pointed out in the live chat here, right now the TSMC semiconductor plant is currently the main place from basically around the world where everybody gets their semiconductors from, and that's right there on Taiwan. And that's the big prize that's on the island, is the TSMC plant. And right now, it looks like the new TSMC plant, which is being built here in the United States, is expected by the first half of 2025, but that's only an estimate. So we currently don't have the ability to produce high volume production of those semiconductors at this time. So, it's imperative that we still help Taiwan, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because we rely heavily on those chips, which are literally put in every appliance and every device that we pretty much make here right now and we use in the US. So it is prudent to actually help out for that reason.
Not only is it important for the reason of the computer chips, it's also important because Taiwan is a critical part of the island chain, including the Philippines, the southern Japanese island chain that heads all the way to Taiwan, that is a part of our Chinese containment policy, where we're able to create a physical net that China cannot really pass through, at least on a military level, and start to build spheres of influence deeper inside the Pacific or even outside of the area of the South China Sea. We generally want to keep the Chinese where they are. In Taiwan, while not being an official Western ally, because we actually, crazily enough, don't recognize them officially as a sovereign nation, they are still a critical part of that defensive chain. If the Chinese ever ended up taking over Taiwan, our entire containment element, from Japan to the Chain Islands to the Philippines to everything down near the Java Sea, would pretty much be for naught, because the Chinese would be able to bypass it by just sending ships straight around Taiwan and out into the open Pacific, able to exert influence and control over areas far beyond their borders and far into the Pacific, creating a great deal of issues for us, and also creating a great deal of issues if a major conventional war was to break out, because Chinese submarines could easily slip into the Pacific and cause a great deal of damage to commercial and military shipping that would be going on during wartime. But speaking of wartime, it does appear that the United States is still taking the necessary actions and precautions in the armed forces to prepare for the outbreak of war. And we have been able to hear that today on the island of Guam, a major success has been made in the name of the Republic and our ability to defend our skies, as we were able to hear that the Aegis Ashore system, using a Missile 3 Block 2A interceptor, has been able to intercept a medium-range ballistic missile flying off the coast of Andersen Air Force Base. This is a major success success by the United States, as it is showing that the Aegis Ashore system is a successful air defense system and is capable of intercepting some of the greater threats that would plague the Western world in the outbreak of a conventional war with a major power. This is also letting us know that the Aegis Ashore systems, not only in the Pacific but also in Eastern Europe as well, will be able to provide the necessary shield that will protect the NATO alliance from a major attack by the Russian Federation's missile and rocket forces. This would be putting us in a very good position going forward, because if the Aegis Ashore can largely shoot down the majority of the high threat targets, this would ensure that the United States and the Western world as a whole will be able to have time to counterattack in a conventional situation and start to put the Russians, or the Chinese for that matter, on the back foot if they were to start to directly attack the United States or its Western allies either in the Pacific or inside of Europe. This is a major piece of news, and while there isn't really much more to say than the test was successful, which is a huge thing, it is going to be a good thing for us strategically going forward. Moving on from the news at Guam and into South Korea, we were able to see that the South Koreans are also unveiling their brand new defense system today, a directed energy weapon called the Anti-Aircraft Weapon Block 1, a very creative name, and we also hear that they're already creating a Block 2 that is mobile. The Block 1, however, that we're seeing right here will be mounted on top of skyscrapers inside of Seoul, and the general plan is that using these directed energy weapons, they will be able to shoot down any incoming North Korean artillery or MLRS rounds before they even impact the city of Seoul, largely protecting the civilian population below and heavily mitigating the North Koreans' ability to strike fear into the Republic of Korea's government that mass civilian casualties may result from the outbreak of conflict on the peninsula once more. A major defensive element.
Is that a laser that's being developed by South Korea themselves, or is that something they're getting help from by a foreign government or a foreign agency?
I believe it's something that they're largely producing on their own.
Interesting, because that's kind of odd, because literally, like, we got Israel producing the Iron Beam, you have South Korea here developing their own. I think pretty much every country around the world right now is like in the final stages of development of some sort of laser style weapon for air defense, which is very interesting. They're all completing it around the same time, but very good to see.
It is great to see, and these laser systems are the future of air defense. We'll probably see that in the future, laser systems are able to be powerful enough and far enough in range that they are able to contend with even larger targets, such as those medium range and intercontinental ballistic missiles as well. Hopefully the sensors and radar systems will be able to catch up as well, so that way those systems are able to be used to their full potential. But nevertheless, moving on to the other side of the DMZ, we were also able to hear that North Korea is getting new aircraft, brand new spanking aircraft. These things are the newest, the top of the line for the 1980s. We are hearing that apparently they're going to be getting some brand new MiG-29s and Su-27s, the first Su-27s to ever enter the North Korean Air Force, but it's only at the mere exchange of a couple of dead North Koreans that they're going to ship over into Russia to fight in the Ukraine war, but no one really cares about those guys, right? But nevertheless, this is a big thing for North Korea. They exchanged maybe 10,000 useless North Korean citizens for a couple of high-performance aircraft that would have been the peak of performance back in the 80s. We know that this is an amazing thing, and they're going to be doing a great deal more terrorizing in the East Asian world because of these new aircraft that will help to bring their revolutionary zeal of Chuche to the South Koreans.
Man, it's kind of crazy. Like, you know, countries like are accepting cryptocurrency and things like that to pay for stuff. But the North Koreans said, screw the cryptocurrency and screw the normal currency. Let's just pay for it in blood. And that's apparently what they did. They paid for it in blood for these very, very old planes, which probably weren't worth it by any means.
Man, like, the North Koreans are out here trading their people like Pokemon. They'll sit there and go, I've got 10,000 North Koreans. What can you do with this? And then the Russians like, 7 Su-27s. Okay, done. There you go. There's 10,000 new North Koreans. And then like, what would you take for 20,000? What will you give us for 20,000 North Koreans? And then the Russians are like, a thank you? That's good enough. Here's another 20,000. Let's like, they just keep on trading them like they're literally just nothing. Like they're less than people.
And also, where's that nuclear tech, by the way? Like, here's a public announcement about the MiG and Su fighter jets coming in, but where's the nuclear tech? Like, surely they wouldn't keep that totally secret. Like, North Korea would want to showcase that to show the fact that they've gotten new nuclear tech, but I haven't seen that yet. I wonder if that's being held back.
I wonder. I have a personal feeling that that probably is being held back, but I wonder how many North Koreans they had to trade, Matthew, to get that nuclear tech. Because if it took
Oh,
we don't know how many they traded for the Su-27s, but how many did they have to trade for some nuclear tech? That had to have been a lot of them.
probably tons. Like we'll probably never know the exact number, but probably tens of thousands, I'd imagine.
And also, I just saw Michael Herrera ask, but who will train them? Well, the Russians will train them on the Su-27s, and then the North Koreans, once they're trained successfully, will fly them. And then in the future, the North Koreans will just train other North Koreans on how to fly the Su-27. They already know how to fly the MiG-29. They've had some of them in service for a while, but we don't know what variant they're getting. And I'm assuming that it probably would be a newer variant of the MiG-29 than the ones they have. They literally have the first MiG-29s that came off the presses, so they're not really that advanced anymore. Let me see if I can show y'all here one of the variants that they would have had. Let's see here. We're not looking for the trainers. We're looking for the first one. Hang on. Dang, man. They don't make this easy to go find one of the older ones. Oh, let's see here. Man, this is they don't make this easy, do they? They don't make it easy.
We make it look easy.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. This one entered service in 1983. This was the original MiG-29 right here, and that would be the Fulcrum A, which you see here. These are the exact ones that the North Koreans actually have to this day. They're incredibly old and generally outdated on the computer side of things, but some of the more modern MiG-29s are far more advanced in capability and are able to do a great deal more. Really, the shining example of one of the most heavily upgraded and most common form of the MiG-29 to be serving in the Russian Air Force today is this one, the MiG-29 SMT. The MiG-29 SMT was modified to have some additional fuel tanks. You can see the giant camelback that they have here behind the cockpit on this one that allows for some additional fuel. They also have advanced computer systems, a more advanced radar system, and this aircraft is able to use the modern R-77, which is the equivalent of the AIM-120 AMRAAM here in the Western world, although it really isn't as good. It also can use the R-73s, which was a given, so generally this thing would be a smaller and more affordable version of the most modern and advanced that Russia is able to offer. We really don't know what variant of Su-27 the Russian Federation will be giving to the North Koreans. We really have no idea. There are a great deal of variants of the Su-27, but I'm having a feeling that they're probably going to be getting some of the older variants of the Su-27, if any, generally for the fact that the Russians are still really leaning heavily on the Su-27s. The Ukrainians are as well, because it's really the only competent aircraft in the air-to-air role that they really have. The MiG-29 can be given away a little bit easier, but the Su-27s are a little bit more rare and precious. So for that reason, we expect that they'll probably be getting the older variants of the Su-27 when they're finally handed over to the North Koreans. But moving on from that little bit of news in North Korea and on out of the area, we were able to hear that a lot of people actually did have a comment today on the North Koreans being supplied with those MiG and Sukhoi fighters. And it does appear that a lot of people are believing this is going to change nothing at all. And Matthew, tell me what people are thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
So a whopping 51% of the audience said it changes absolutely nothing at all, and North Korea will not receive really any help by getting these jets. And 26% said yes, North Korea will be emboldened by receiving these brand new fine fighter jets, and 18% said only if the pilots can be trained. And I will say, I'm not necessarily like solidly in the 18%, but the pilots do have to get trained. Like, that's a big deal. They have to get training, or otherwise they can't really use them. So that's a big deal. But I will say that it probably really changes nothing, because unless North Korea is ready to go to war with South Korea once again, there's really no use for the fighter jets right now. They're very old, and stuff that we give South Korea is going to be newer than that. So it's something, but it's really nothing at the same time. And it's really, honestly, not fair to North Korea whatsoever for all the manpower they've been giving to Russia. And all they get in return so far is MiG and Su fighter jets in return. So I would say that's not a fair trade, but that's just me. You know, I'm not speaking on behalf of Kim, because he knows best. You know, he's a supreme leader. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, Matthew, I'd have to say I don't think it's going to be changing much of anything at all. Here's the South Korean Air Force. Well, you know what? Let me compare the North Korean and South Korean Air Force really quickly. So let me go get that really, really quickly. Oh, come on. Hurry it up. Here we go. All right, so now that we have the comparisons here, it's time to go over what's different. Now, the North Korean Air Force is technically larger than the South Korean Air Force, but that doesn't really mean all too much, and I'll explain why. You see, they have 120 Chengdu J7s. These are MiG-21s from the 1950s, pretty much completely outdated by this point. They also have a 97 Shenyang J6s, which is the MiG-19, which is completely dated and obsolete by all modern purposes. This thing can't even use radar-guided missiles. It's that old, so this thing would stand no chance, be shot down pretty quickly. They also have 106 of these. These were used in the Korean War, mind you.
And it looks like something from that era too. Like it looks like it's probably useless at this point just by looking at it.
Yeah, it does, really. They also have 80 of these IL-28s. This one a little bit nastier, but only by a hair than the ones that actually are in use by North Korea. A bomber from the early 50s. It is completely outdated and would never be used in combat. They have some Su-25s, some Su-7s. These are, by the way, completely dated. They have some completely dated MiG-23s, some completely dated MiG-21s straight up from the Soviet Union, and then they have a few MiG-29s. They have about 35 of them, and these are the only semi-competent aircraft that they have, but even still, these are the first MiG-29s put into service, so while they're somewhat competent, not really. Meanwhile, in the South Korean Air Force, you have some F-5 Tigers. Yeah, they're kind of adequate, not really that advanced. They would be given a run for their money by MiG-23s and MiG-29s for the large part. But then they have 59 F-15s. Now, these are a little bit of an issue because these really, and including especially that's an F-15E, these pretty much outdo anything that the North Koreans have. It is great in the multi-role, so it can do air-to-air as well as it can do air-to-ground. The North Koreans would be having a really tough time just dealing with 59 F-15s alone. The F-15 could quite literally hold down the entire airspace of South Korea against the North Koreans well on into the future with what they have right now. They then have about 160 different variants or 160 F-16s of two different kinds. Those are pretty good. Those speak for themselves. Do I even have to say any more? Also, by the way, they have 39 F-35 Lightnings, which are completely invisible to North Korean radar, so I have a feeling that that would cause a big issue in itself, that they couldn't even see these things in the first place to shoot them down, but they will be able to see quite literally any aircraft in the North Korean Air Force.
And they have 39 in service of the F-35 right now and 20 on order too.
Oh yes. Oh yes, they're building up that force quick.
They could pretty much like take care of North Korea with just that one, just that fleet of F-35s. They could take care of most of the work.
Yeah, I mean, they really could. And then they have 60 T-50s, which these things are actually really, like, sleek looking, I'm not going to lie. They look really, really cool, in my opinion. It's a light multi-role aircraft, and it's pretty competent. I mean, it's not the biggest thing out there, and it's not, like, the real slugger of an aircraft, but it's still a pretty good aircraft for what it is. It was actually indigenously designed and built inside of South Korea. And then, finally, they have probably one of the coolest aircraft outside of the F-35 in their inventory, which has also been made by South Korea as well. The KF-21 Borame, which I've never shown y'all before, but it's their indigenously built stealth fighter that they're putting into service here in the future.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. It's like it's almost like the F-35 a little bit, but just a tad bit different.
It's kind of like a baby F-22. It's smaller than an F-22, but it looks a lot like it. Like, it almost uses the exact same design. But y'all will see that this thing is a great deal smaller. So let me show y'all this. Here's the F-22. You can see the pilot right there for scale. Here's the KF-21, and there's the pilot for scale. Y'all can tell this thing is a little itty-bitty kind of an aircraft. It's so small it doesn't actually have internal bays. Everything is externally mounted on hard points, but it is still stealth. So it will have a reduced radar signature, but at least in practice, considering it has external hard points, not internals, this thing will be picked up on radar, but it'll be lower visibility or low visibility compared to a normal cross-section on a fourth-generation aircraft. These things are pretty neat. They're pretty cool. They have 6 prototypes currently. You can actually see one of them here on the tarmac. I'm not gonna lie, dude, these things actually do look pretty freaking good for what they are.
Yeah, I like them. It's like you said, the F-22 light. Like, it really does look cool. There's something about it being all fit and trim like that. Like, I like the F-22, obviously, but the sleekness of this one, I really like that too.
Also, let me see if I can get y'all a direct comparison here of size of the F-22 and the KF-21 to really hit home that this thing looks to be the little brother. So this thing, the F-22, it is 62 feet in length. The KF-21 is only 50 feet in length. And we're talking about the earlier versions. The later prototypes are about 55 feet, but they're still about 10 feet shorter than the F-22 in general. The wingspan of the F-22 is 44 feet, and the wingspan of the KF-21 is only about 36 feet. So y'all can see that this thing is just a little bit smaller in every single way than an F-22, and quite literally is the little brother, I guess you could call it, of the F-22. They still look pretty much just like him, and we can also see what appears to be the trainer variant here with the co-pilot sitting behind him, or maybe the multi-role variant that is able to have a secondary pilot, a co-pilot, that is able to operate the weapon systems, or the weapons officer on board. Nevertheless, it is a very cool kind of an aircraft, and these could also give the North Koreans a run for their money, of course, because they are way beyond anything's abilities. So introducing a small handful of Su-27s into North Korea's Air Force quite literally means nothing. And this isn't even talking about the Republic of Korea Army's air defense forces that would also be helping out in the fight in the skies, as well as the new laser defense forces that they're now starting to set up around Seoul, and also creating mobile variants to be able to use as self-propelled anti-aircraft. This is just a tip of the iceberg for the large part in South Korea's air defense, and North Korea getting some Su-27s quite literally changes nothing in the air defense aspect in South Korea. And this is also considering that it would be a fight just in between North and South Korea, and not including that the United States is a defense partner of South Korea's and would get actively involved in a war if North Korea attacked South Korea. So this quite literally changes nothing on the strategic level at all in the conflict. It's really just something for the North Koreans to show to their people, to make it look like North Korea is as modern and as advanced as the countries they literally know nothing about, because they don't allow them to hear about the outside world. So moving on from North Korea and on into the area of the Middle East, we have also been able to hear some major news today down here of a huge Israeli air operation that was conducted overnight. One of the biggest in their history, even bigger than the air operations conducted during the Yom Kippur War and the 6 Days War. It was huge. A massive thing. I mean, it was an insanely massive thing. But before we get into it, I do understand, Matthew, that we have just a couple of questions to answer before we move on into this segment, and also into Ukraine as well. So what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat segment of the night, we have our first one here, which is from none other than BC Skyman. He's back once again, and it's good to see you, BC. And he throws in a combined $70 support, and that is the largest super chat of the night. And thank you very much, BC, for that massive support yet again. And he says, great stream, Enforcers, and take one from the chat, please.
And thank you so much for the massive support, BC Skyman, and thank you for enjoying the stream tonight. We have put a load of work into this thing. This is actually one of the craziest things in news that we've ever had to cover. Today, the short war summary was about 50 minutes long, and that was me trying to make it as short as I possibly could, and still it ended up being 50 minutes long. And I gotta thank you so much for your support, BC Skyman, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. These streams run entirely off of viewer support, and it's really the only way that we were able to make this thing possible day in and day out is thanks to y'all support, and I gotta thank you massively for that, BC Skyman, because if it was not for folks like you, we would simply not be able to make this channel possible. And so a huge, massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we will make sure to take one from the chat. And so what do we got from the live chat, Matthew, in honor of BC Skyman?
All right, so the live chat question in honor of BC is going to go to Michael Herrera from the live chat. He said, how is the U.S. responding to this Taiwan naval drill?
The United States isn't really responding to the Taiwan naval drill at the moment. Usually our response comes about 48 to 72 hours later, and is somewhat delayed, usually to try and avoid creating higher tensions within the region, because if we respond immediately, we may end up creating an armed standoff with the Chinese, and then might kick off a war preemptively when we're really not ready. And then it becomes a question of, are the Chinese ready? And that's something we may or may not know well in the intelligence circle, but at the same time, we really do not want to risk gambling on that one and losing, because we could kick off a war that we could lose because we were not really prepared to do so. So we have not seen an American response yet, but we probably will see one within 48 to 72 hours, so really 2 to 3 days from now. And so with that, I hope that does address that question the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, BC Skyman. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Neiman Bauer, who's also a longtime channel legend, who puts in a $20 donation. nation, and thank you very much, Neiman, for that support as well. He says, good morning, enforcers and the chat, and that intro makes me proud of being an ally with the U.S., even though Austria is a neutral country, and long live the West, and I almost forgot, where is the merch shop? And also, by the way, the merch shop sadly does not have any merch on it. We won't be releasing any merch for Christmas because sadly our plate is too full right now, the news is too much, and it's hard to keep up with that alone. So sadly, the merch will be pushed off until 2025, but we will have another run soon. And also, thank you very much, Neiman, for that support. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Neiman Bauer, our Austrian viewer. And it's great to hear from you again. It's good to know that you're proud to be an ally of the United States of America, because the United States of America is proud to be allies with all of the amazing nations of the world that we are able to call our friends and comrades in arms. And I gotta thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and enjoying it greatly, because while Austria is a neutral country, it largely does fall within the greater Western framework in reality. And it's always good to know that Austria is a great place that people can go to vacation and look at the amazing history and rich culture of the Austrian people, which is a very, very interesting one. But nevertheless, I got to thank you so much once again for the support. It is always wonderful to have folks like you here, and we love to know that folks love the United States as much as the United States loves the rest of the Western world. And also, I gotta say, let's see, long live the West, I would agree. And also, yes, the merch shop is not here yet. We were wanting to do a merch shop, but we really couldn't. We tried to figure out how to do it for Christmas so that we could get a whole bunch of Christmas stuff out for people, but we really were not able to do it because we are very, very busy behind the scenes at the moment, just keeping the news running. It takes a lot. For example, today I was quite literally working from about let's see, it was 9 in the morning, I believe, till now. And I maybe had about an hour break somewhere in between. So I've been working for about 10 hours at this point on the channel. So it's been a little bit of a tougher day, generally because the news is insane. And also we've had a whole bunch of cool, crazy stuff going on in the background that is helping us to get ready for some brand new projects that will be coming around at the beginning of next year. And y'all make sure to stick around for those because I think y'all really like those a lot. But nevertheless, I thank you so much once again for the support, Neiman Bauer, and I hope that does address that the best I can, because we are getting geared up for the next soundtrack release. I'll let y'all know that. I'll tell y'all that really quickly. Right now, we are trying to build up a war chest for the large part to be able to put towards, well, I'm building up a war chest myself personally, to get ready to create a new part of a Enforcer soundtrack like we did with the Armed Forces medley to add to our intro, because we're slowly going to make the intro LSA exclusive, meaning that you will not be hearing any of the songs that are played in our intro anywhere else but here on this channel. And for that reason, we have been taking on some additional projects in the background. Some of y'all may have seen it today in the short war summary, to be able to build up the necessary war chest to be able to go forward and conduct another project like that again. They're not exactly cheap or easy to do, but nevertheless, I love doing them, and I love to see how well y'all have enjoyed the Armed Forces medley every single time it's been played, and we have an idea for something else. This time celebrating the citizens of America as a whole and not just the Armed Forces, which is an incredibly cool idea that I've had for a while, because while everyone always loves to really talk about how proud they are of the United States Armed Forces, speaking of Neiman Bauer and being proud of the United States and being proud of an American ally, everyone is always proud of the U.S. military, without a doubt. And I hope that our Armed Forces medley makes all of the former serving, the currently serving, and all of the citizens of the Republic incredibly proud with knowing that that is your nation's armed forces, because all of that footage that was used in that medley was actually accumulated from just the past year and a half of our military doing operations around the globe, which is an incredibly amazing thing when you think about it, because they really do look impressive. But nevertheless, the other group that never really gets a lot of praise in this country are the people watching this channel itself that make up a large majority of its population, the citizens of the nation itself. And it really is something to say that not really a lot of people get praise. Not really a lot of folks get told that they're proud because you're going to work, because you're contributing to what this republic is each and every day. And we would like to make a special segment in our intro to let y'all know that we are incredibly proud of y'all and everything that y'all do each and every single day to keep this nation going. All of the electricians, the plumbers, the steel workers, the folks in the offices, the services industries, the HVAC guys, the firemen, the policemen, all the folks who make this nation a reality and help it to keep its part of the world turning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without end. We want y'all to know that we're also incredibly proud of y'all, and y'all have a large part in the major framework that makes this this republic a reality each and every single day. I think it would be incredibly cool to do, and we're already pretty much working on that project. So I can't wait for y'all to see it, because I think y'all will be really, really proud of such a thing, because it's just neat. And also, Monster Lab brought up truckers. Yeah, there will also be parts in it for the truckers, the railroad men, the pilots and air traffic controlmen of the airports, the harbor masters and the pilots and captains of the ships that take our cargo and passengers around the world seas, all that kind of stuff. That is something that we want to do as well. We want to give a massive salute and a shout out to every single sector of the private sector that we can, for the most part, and all the folks that make that up, which is literally the entire nation. So we will be trying to do that. That will be incredibly cool, and that's what we're kind of working towards in the background. And there's a lot of side quests that we're having to do in the meantime to be able to make that a reality. But still, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Neiman Bauer. And also, I see a lot of people bring up farmers. Yeah, farmers will be included. Everyone's going to be included. I'm trying to, like, rattle off everything I can think of right now. Farmers, for some reason, I didn't think about, but farmers will be included. Quite literally anything and everything that you can imagine that is involved in making the country possible, we'll be trying to include it as best we can. So there will be farmers. There will be people working in heavy industry, in the services sector. You know, there will be people working in transportation. There will be some, references to all of the federal servants that work in the government, and all of the state servants as well, in the millions that continue to keep this nation running on a bureaucratic level. Quite literally everything that we can think of, we'll be trying to throw it into this little salute. And it will have a very nice, a wonderful little song going over it. That's very American, so we can't wait to put that out. But still, thank you so much once again for supporting Neiman Bauer, and I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, which I say at the end of everything. I'm going to have to stop saying that. I used to say that just to let y'all know back in the day, because there used to be a whole bunch of goofy people who would come in here, and of course I'd say my opinion, and then people would get really miffed and angry because they would say, that's just your opinion. So then I would always end everything with saying, in my opinion, so that way people didn't act like I was trying to act like God and say that my word was law. But I'm going to generally stop doing that, because I'm getting annoyed with saying in my opinion after everything. So I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the last super chat of this segment. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this one is going to go to Alfie. You puts in a very generous 599 NOK, which is, I believe, a Norwegian kroner, and that translates to 53 USD. And thank you very much, Alfie, for that very generous support. He said, first one to the war chest, and love the work you guys are doing, and LSA family are the best, and give some love to Enforcer Matt and the Enforcer for the time they take to give us the information. And thank you very much, Alfie, for the kind words. We appreciate it.
And I gotta thank you so much for that incredible support to the war chest. That is huge support, all the way from Norway, up there in the beautiful mountains of Scandinavia. A beautiful part of the world, and I wish I could go there one day and see it. We were watching a little documentary, because Matthew keeps the TV running, on a train that actually travels through, I believe it's the area around Venstra. I believe it's actually, this was one of the stations that they showed, Matthew, on the documentary. But
it was actually. It looks like a kind of like a barn type deal, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, they were traveling through the mountains of Norway by rail, and it was so beautiful. And I was like, one day I would love to go to Norway, maybe on an official state visit as president of the United States. Maybe one day I can get up there and take a look around, because that's probably the only time I'll be able to see the place, to be entirely honest. But beyond that, it is a beautiful country, and I thank you for being one of the incredible folks from such a beautiful nation. Natural beauty, it's blessed with a great deal. And supporting the war chest so that way we can continue to make Enforcer special projects. We love making them. Well, I personally love making them. I was the one who kind of did the whole thing in the background last time and put it out, and Matthew was actually amazed with the end result as well. He was like, dang, that's patriotic, and that's what we're shooting for on this channel. We're shooting to be patriotic, and I hope that we are able to hit the nail on that once again. But still, thank you so much for loving the work that we're doing. We try our hardest to put this thing out each and every day, and support like yours, Alfie, helps to make this thing a reality and helps us to keep it rolling. And I gotta say that the LSA truly is the best group out there on the internet. Tonight's actually a smaller stream. We were expecting for it to get up towards 10,000 or a little over 10,000 live viewers, but for some reason, I think the algorithm knocked it right when it was about to go live. I don't know why. I know you saw that too, Matthew, because the graph was like skyrocketing there, and then it just kind of started to slowly grow after that, and I was like, huh, that's weird. I was like, I don't know what's up with that. But
I'm not sure either. I wish I could answer the question, but sadly, I don't know.
yeah, I was sitting there. I was like, wait a minute, are we lagging? Are we lagging a lot tonight, Matthew?
I'm not hearing lag on my end, except for like intermittently. I'll hear like a blip here and there, but I'm seeing some people in the chat saying that occasionally my audio is breaking up. So it's not as bad as usual, I don't think, but it's still doing it.
I'll be honest with you. I think over the last hour, there's been about 3 little blips, but they're not long, and they don't really last that much to really notice them too badly. I'll be honest with you, man. It's doing way better than it was before, where literally every time you talked, it sounded like a robot.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't start flaring up again. Hopefully it goes away completely.
Yeah, hopefully it does, because I think we might try this out for a few days, and if it doesn't work, we'll go with Plan B. But it still does look like it's working, because we actually replaced the RAM in my computer, and so we upped it from 16 gigabytes of RAM to 32, and it looks to be helping out massively with the lag side of things on the stream. But beyond that, I do have to say, moving on from that though, and not getting sidetracked with the whole lag thing, I do have to thank you so much for saying that the LSA is an amazing community. Right now, we probably have a lot of the bulk of the old guards that are here tonight. And I'm seeing a lot of old guards in the chat, and a couple of folks that we don't really see often, but we still see good enough, and to know that they're usually around these days. And I gotta say that the Lee Spring Army is truly one of the kindest and most incredible groups on the entirety of the internet. It was the first to really spearhead fundraising for Ukraine in the large, really industrialized scale, raising around $1.5 million in total up to date. It's an incredible group that is always kind, it's always considerate, and it's very level-headed, which is something that you just don't really find out there anymore on the internet. You always find political talking heads, and you always find people who really have unstructured ideas that are very emotional, but the LSA isn't like that, and the LSA isn't a community that gravitates around that sort of a thing. It is incredibly level-headed, it's incredibly reasonable, and it's great to know that the LSA is that kind of a community and exists here on this channel. We could have had any other kind of a community, but nevertheless, some of the brightest and most level-headed people make up the ranks of the Lee Spring Army, and it makes me very proud to say that this channel is able to say that we are home to such a thing, which is literally a unicorn on the internet these days. But still, thank you so much for the thanks. I personally don't do incredibly well with getting thanks. I really found that out the other day because I was hopping in a Discord call with a group of folks who are in the Space Force. Some of them actually are probably watching the stream right now, and one of them, I didn't know this, but they watched the show and they went absolutely crazy. Like, they were like, "Oh my god, it's the Enforcer! I love your show!" And I was like, "Oh, thank you." I was like, "Thanks." I was like, "I don't really know how to receive this." I was really shocked with how like excited they were, because I don't really run into that too much often anymore. At least in person. On stream, we always have folks who love the channel a great deal, like you, Alfie. But still, I thank you so much for the kind words and the massive support. Because while I never really know how to receive like such an overflowing of kindness and like thankfulness, I suppose, we are always incredibly appreciative of it, and it really does mean a lot to me and Matthew. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are moving on out of this question segment and on into the Middle East, as we were able to hear that the Israeli Air Force conducted one of the largest airstrikes that has ever been seen so far in the Middle East overnight. We were able to hear that around 250 individual targets were hit directly by the Israeli Defense Forces. These included jets, warships in port, as well as ammunition storages throughout the entirety of the the former Syrian Arab Republic. We were able to see some of the pictures of the aftermath here, as we were able to see that the bombs penetrated the hardened shelters that a lot of these aircraft were stored in and completely destroyed them in the end. We were able to get some additional news about this as well, showing the pictures of destroyed air bases throughout the entirety of the country. This was not destroyed by the Israelis. This was actually destroyed by the Syrian rebels as they were advancing into Damascus, and from what we understand, the Russians were still inside of this vehicle when it happened. Still, the other pictures are showing once again the destroyed hardened shelters and hangars that we saw in the last one, but we got an additional picture here showing a Gazelle light utility helicopter outfitted in an air-to-ground role, which they can do, sitting on the tarmac, largely derelict. It already looks to have been derelict for years, but once again, one of its partner helicopters right here had been clearly destroyed by the Israeli airstrike. And we can also see that the hardened shelter back there appears to be showing some visible signs of damage to the roof, as you can see the light of day through it. But beyond that, it does seem as though the Israelis are trying very hard to ensure that this fledgling Syrian republic will not really have any weaponry to work with, and also to try and ensure that a certain kind of an Islamic state that isn't really that nice won't really have anything to work with either. But you can also see that the naval infrastructure, as well as the actual vessels of the former Syrian Arab Republic's navy, have also been destroyed as well. And we can see these smoldering and smoking as they rest on the bottom of the port inside of Latakia.
Just complete carnage, too. Like, you look at this and you think, dang, like, the Israelis were not holding back on the Navy. The Navy wasn't much to write home about in the first place, but still, though, like, these things are basically scrapped at this point.
Man, I mean, that quite literally is pretty much salvage at this point. I don't think there's any way to even recover these vessels. The little vessels like these, the little missile boats, they really aren't recoverable at all if they're ever hit. They pretty much just melt, and it looks like they actually did start to melt in some places of the hull, because there's obvious signs of warping when you get a close-up of them.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Half-sunk vessels and stuff just all over the place.
And you see them here smoking. And also,
I think that one right there was in tough shape before they even hit it, but, you know, didn't do it any favors.
Man, the tugboat, man, it's like that thing was in rough shape like years ago, man. Also, I just saw someone say, you can't be both pro-Israel and pro-rebels. Pick one. That's a really goofy take. Like, I don't mean to just be forward about that, but that's really goofy. I'll explain to you why. The rebels, 3 out of the 4 factions in Syria right now, are trying to create a democratic form of government that is secular. There's only one that's trying to create some sort of an Islamic emirate. So it's really goofy to say that we can't pick them and the Israelis at the same time, because it's quite easily possible that they could start to be entering the Western world here very soon. So that's kind of stupid. That's really trying to quite literally cut your hand off before you can even see the cards you're dealt, which is a very preemptive and rash thing to do. It seems unreasonable. But we see them still showing the damage to the missile boats as they're quite literally sitting underwater at this point.
You know, for whatever the boats were worth, or ships, if you want to call them ships, probably more boats is probably the right word, but you know the rebels are sitting there just wincing, looking at this, thinking, damn, like the only like couple of dinghies they had that they could have taken from the Syrian Navy have been just gone up in smoke. Like, they don't have anything at this point.
Yeah, it's a not really a great thing. But that's the end of the clip, and it then begins to reset and pretty much show us the same damage that we've been shown a million times in the clip before. But moving on out of that, we were also able to see that near Omsk, an ammo depot was destroyed, and we were able to get the video of the secondary explosion that was raining out of the ammo depot after the bomb hit.
Yeah, let's see.
But that's the end of the clip.
That guy in the background was just going, is it Houthi? Is it Houthi? What was he even saying back there? Did you hear that guy in the background?
Man, he was saying, is that the worm? Is that the worm? And the guy up front said, it's the Muad'Dib. There's something like that, you know, like that goofy Dune stuff. Like, but anyways, moving on from that, though, we did see that the Israelis have delivered a devastating blow to the military capabilities of the former Syrian Arab Republic. And there is a decent thing to be said that this might not be that good of an idea in some ways, maybe a good idea in others. Generally, the new Syrian Republic that will be founded is brand spanking new. And I can see that, let's see, wait, hang on, hold up. I want to make sure to address this here, because I said that was goofy to say. Now this person is saying there is no evidence that Israel destroyed any aircraft or ground vehicles in Syria, although we have literal video footage that we just mulled over showing all of their ships destroyed, a lot of their aircraft destroyed, as well as a ammunition depot that just blew up overnight. I'm guessing all that happened spontaneously and was not the Israelis, although the Israelis admitted that they bombed the stuff. So, you know, I guess I'm misinformed, and the Israeli government is misinformed about their own actions. It appears all that we we have a brand new Anthony Studebaker here. We have the Rusty King of Utah. And so we'll be checking our news with Rusty King of Utah to make sure that it's not rusty and it's clean, like Rusty's clean. But nevertheless, moving on from that, we were able to hear that the Israelis have bombed heavily the military capabilities of the former Syrian Arab Republic overnight, which, like I was saying, is a good thing in some instances, a bad thing in others. This republic is brand new, and is going to be formed out of the ashes of the Syrian Arab Republic in a way that we're already starting to see is pretty revolutionary, not in an Islamic way, but actually in a very pro-Western direction, which is something that we just didn't really expect. I'm not gonna lie, we didn't really expect it, but we're already seeing that they're starting to move in a pro-Western direction for the large part. Another thing is that we are starting to hear of the rise of ISIS in the middle of the desert in between Deir ez-Zor as well as the area just east of Palmyra. So generally the area where they were actually born from before. It appears that that ideology is still strong in this area. However, with the Syrians destroying a large amount of military equipment and capabilities, they really aren't weakening the ISIS factions that are beginning to crop up very slowly out here in the desert. They're really starting to cripple the new government's abilities to try and deal with these rebels in the future. Well, really not the rebels, but the terrorists in the future. It's a little bit of an issue because, yes, while if these groups start to rapidly expand and take over Syria, they may be able to capture some of these aircraft and weapons. Most of these aircraft and weapons had not been used for years by the Syrian Arab Republic, and not only that, it is generally stripping the new government of its abilities to be able to defend itself against ISIS, which may even allow them to expand even more rapidly and faster than before. This may not be a good idea, and also, even if that does not end up being the case on a strategic level against the ISIS cells rising in the Syrian desert, it could end up souring diplomatic relations in between this new Syria and the West. A lot of people are still misunderstanding the groups that took over Syria, and we have been trying to beat this over the head of some people because some people just never want to believe that there could be a good thing that comes out of the Middle East, which I kind of get, but at the same time, that's just generally being pessimistic. There is a great deal of positiveness to come out of this for the large part. There are 4 factions in Syria: the Druze rebels, the Syrian Free Army, as well as the SDF, led largely by the Kurds. The SDF, the Syrian Free Army, and the Druze rebels all want to create a secular democratic form of government. The only one that has said that they want to create some form of an Islamic emirate is the Harir al-Tasham, which has been classified as a terrorist organization by many, including the United States of America, although I believe that we're starting to remove them from the list here very soon. Nevertheless, out of the 4 factions that are there, it appears that they are actually working off of each faction has a fair say in the creation of this new Syria. And it looks as though it's generally heading in the direction of becoming a secular and largely democratic form of government that will be ruling Syria from this point forward. And with this in mind, we want to know that we have to treat this new nation very carefully because we really don't know what it's going to be doing. And it looks like it's actually going to be doing a lot that is heading in the Western direction. Now, if we generally start to treat this new Syria hostilely on the outset, we are going to create an unfriendly atmosphere that does not invite them into the Western world and instead pushes them once again back towards the Iranians and the Russians by our actions, not theirs. And if we do that, we are missing a prime opportunity to see Syria brought into the Western fold and to see pretty much a homogenous control by the United States over the Middle East, which is strategically important on into the future. This situation has to be dealt with precautiously, and while a lot of people may be saying that they don't trust the Syrians for A, B, and C reason, there's no reason to not trust the rebels. Y'all didn't trust Assad, which was quite a good reason not to. The guy was a sick, genocidal maniac. But Assad is gone, and the government that he was in control of is now gone as well. Going off of that, we are seeing that there is a chance for something new to come out of Syria, and treating them hostilely off the bat will ensure that whatever new thing comes out of this, it will not be friendly to the West, because their first experience in the greater world was getting beat up by the West. So with this in mind, we want to sit back for a minute, let them do what they're going to do, and then once they actually start to maybe move in a direction that we don't really like, then get involved. But we don't want to start bombing them off the bat and also conducting military incursions into their territory, because that's starting to give them a bad impression immediately of what the West is about. And that's generally what we do not want to do, at least in my opinion. It's really against Western interests. And speaking of that, we have been able to hear a little bit more clarification today about what the new Syrian government is starting to do. In a amazing sign, which is showing us that there is a lot of good to come out of this potentially, all rebel factions have withdrawn their armed forces from the major city centers today. And now those cities are being administered by local police forces instead of the rebel forces themselves. This is a massive thing that really does not get seen really anywhere else in any kind of an uprising conducted by rebel forces. And this is showing us that they largely are trying to respect the civil administrations and the bureaucracy of the country and allow for these administrations to be represented properly and to have their at least correct amount of social power that they deserve in a democratic form of a government. If we were to see that they were trying to create an authoritarian state, the police forces would actually be the rebel armies themselves, and they would be running the law and order inside of these cities. However, they're already allowing the local police to once again take over the control of the cities, which is showing us that they are trying to create an aura of law and order within these cities that has some sort of a civil aspect to it instead of a martial aspect to it like other countries have in the past, like the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which still allows the Taliban's army to control the policing of the streets. Meanwhile, we were able to hear that a new interim government has been created and is officially taking power at this moment today, and we already heard one of the most important things that we could have heard at this moment, letting us know what direction the rebels are going to be leading Syria into. They are going to be creating a free market economy inside of Syria. According to Syria's new government, it is announced today that it will move away from the state-controlled economy that Bashar al-Assad had in place to a free market model to attract investment. This is a major thing in the future. Attracting investment means that the country has to be suitable to foreign investors. And this generally means that radical factions do not exist in the government because that makes the country uninvestable, at least to foreign investors. This can be seen time and time again throughout the Middle East inside of the Kingdom of Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, as well as Kuwait, where they heavily drew back their traditional mindsets and maybe even some more radical factions in their government to make their nations a lot more suitable to foreign investment, and to also make it a lot more appeasing for people to travel there, for tourism, for business, and everything else. That means that generally, because of the institution of a free market economy, radicalism and extremism really just simply cannot survive because it would destroy the economic apparatus that exists inside of that country. With that in mind, we know that Syria is at this very moment, with what the interim government has already done today, it is moving into a pro-Western alignment by its economic standing alone. And this is a very important thing to remember because they're already moving in our direction. We do not want to jeopardize this situation by being heavy-handed and hostile to a group that appears to be reaching out and trying to enter the Western world by implementing a free market economy, which is a very Western thing for them to do at this point, and they're already showing a very understanding and compassionate governance by removing their armed forces from the cities and allowing for the police to administer law and order. With this in mind, a lot of people are talking about what happened today with the Israelis largely bombing pretty much the only military equipment that this new Syria would be able to inherit to defend itself from possible adversaries like the growing ISIS cells inside of the Syrian desert. And it appears that a decent amount of people are believing that this action by the Israelis has created a power vacuum, and others believe that Israel is only defending itself from a possible future adversary. And Matthew, what are people saying about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 43% of the audience said yes, it is creating a power vacuum, while 31% said no, Israel simply defending itself, and 16% said not really, but it might create a power vacuum maybe in the future. And I will say this, Syria did just come out of a brutal dictatorship. They finally got rid of the evil dictator Assad, and now he's out of the picture. And Israel has now come in and invaded Syria and also destroyed pretty much every naval and air force asset that Syria had at their disposal. And that would have been in the hands of the rebels at this point for them to use for their own self-defense. So, like the enforcer is saying, we really did not know which way this government's going to go. It looks like they're leaning pro-Western, oddly enough, which is a good thing to see, but obviously only time will tell which way they're actually actually going. But in my opinion, I think Israel is creating a power vacuum here. We were wondering, is ISIS going to reconstitute and once again challenge the rebels for their governance? And that is still a possibility. And with the Air Force assets being taken out, that is putting the rebels at a disadvantage now, because if ISIS rears their heads up once more, it'll be much easier now to overthrow the rebels if ISIS was able to pull that off. So now Israel must come in and do constant airstrikes to keep ISIS at bay, or otherwise the rebels might get taken down, and then ISIS could control Syria in a worst-case scenario. So I'm definitely with the 44%. It is creating a power vacuum. I'm not really sure what Israel's up to here. Like, they say they're trying to create a buffer zone, but in reality, though, their tanks are just simply 20 kilometers outside of Damascus, and I'm not really sure what their goals or objectives are at this point. How far are they going to go into Syria before stopping? I don't know, but I think they're going a little bit overboard. So I'm with the 44%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I do believe that the Israelis are acting a little bit too rash at the moment with conducting the heavy bombings of Syria. But I actually will have to say I did look into the situation a little bit more, and I actually had someone explain to me, and I also read a lot more about the Israeli border incursion. And it does look as though there really isn't a protest at the moment by the Syrians inside of Syria at this time about the incursion into the DMZ and a little bit into Syria. And it also appears that the Israeli government did state that they would be returning the territory once the interim government was able to create a solid foundation for Syria in the future, although that's really ambiguous and they could quite literally say that they've never created that foundation. They are saying that they will give it back very near in the future. So with that in mind, I believe that this was a bit of a defensive action by the Israelis, which they have a right to do, at least a little bit. But if they go overboard, then I'm once again going to have to be on the line that that's going a little bit too far. However, the Israelis bombing 250 military sites last night is once again rash. I will have to say that. And a lot of people are always going to say silly stuff. I'll be honest with y'all. One thing that I realized when we were last on air on Sunday is that there never really will be a reasonable discussion about the Israelis, because either people love Israel so much that they think that everything that Israel does is always justified and they can never do anything wrong, or they hate Israel so much that everything they do is wrong and the nation doesn't need to exist. It's one or the other with folks. There isn't never really a rational discussion about the Israelis that can be found anywhere. But beyond that, while we were entirely, and I always have to preface this because people will start making straw man statements about us, we were entirely for Israel defending itself and invading the Gaza Strip and destroying Hamas. And so were we when they invaded Lebanon and started to destroy the Hezbollah forces that were inside of the country. What we are not for, however, is aggressive, unwarranted actions that don't appear to be within a defensive framework, which is how the West fights wars. We rarely ever fight preemptive actions or preemptive strikes. We always fight in a defensive counterattack form. That's how the West works. And Israel conducting a border incursion, at least for the time, makes sense considering that the nation that was bordering them literally collapsed, and then they saw, according to the Israeli statements, that some armed groups were beginning to amass near the border and looked like they may attack Israeli settlements in the area. So then they created the militarized DMZ at the moment. That made sense, but going out of their way to destroy the only military equipment that the new Syrian interim government will have to be able to try and counter, say, the new ISIS cells that are popping up in the desert, that didn't really seem like a smart move to me. It's really only going to be creating a power vacuum, as this government is going to be weak, and now any military support that they get has to be provided from some outside power. The Turks, the United States, or someone else altogether. I don't really know why the action was made, and it doesn't really seem like a good idea. And I still see that a lot of people are greatly misinformed about the situation on what is going on the ground. Someone said there is zero government currently in Syria. That is untrue. They created an interim government today, which is creating a new Syria. That's what is going on right now. There is a government in Syria, and even more so. Go ahead.
And also, it's not going to be a perfect government either, because they just formed it. And also, remember, these guys are transitioning from being quote unquote freedom fighters, rebels, or whatever you want to call them. They're going from that, which is very brutal day to day, and they're trying to to transfer over to this administrative role, which is extremely difficult. For example, look at the Taliban in Afghanistan. They really struggled really badly transferring over to that administrative role of governance, because it's actually much harder to govern than it is to take a place over. It's much harder to do that, and there's going to be a steep learning curve for those rebels, no matter who they're putting in charge. It's going to be pretty steep. And also, they're trying to transition to a brand new way of governance, which is leaning pro-Western, like we said, to attract new investment, and that's going to be a learning curve in itself. So I think people are they're recognizing they're forming an interim government, because they obviously see that in the news, but they're denying the fact that it's a government. And it is a government. It's just kind of a weak one right now.
And this is actually the areas right now that are under interim government control and still under SDF control. The SDF controls pretty much the northern areas of the country, and the interim government controls pretty much everything else. The interim government combined the Druze rebels, the Syrian Free Army, and the Harir al-Tasham into one governance system. It's pretty interesting, and the SDF still operates democratically. And I was trying to read up a little bit more about the Syrian interim government, also called the Syrian National Army, or the Free Syrian Army, which, once again, I do have to remind everyone, the Free Syrian Army, or the SNA, as it's being called, is the American-backed, democratically and secular aligned faction that wanted to create a democratic republic inside of Syria. And that's largely what the framework of the interim government is existing as at the moment. So with this in mind, knowing that, it isn't a good idea to go out of our way to start kind of bombing the interim government and the SDF when we don't really know what they're going to be doing yet. Like that's the thing. And I see a lot of people I see a lot of people trying to take out the sins of the Assad regime on these rebels who fought against the Assad regime. Some people are saying, well, Syria has been trying to kill Israelis for 50 years. I say let them have it. But I guess a lot of people are forgetting that was Maher al-Assad, which was Bashar al-Assad's dad, and Bashar al-Assad, not these rebels. Like I don't know if people just want the Syrians to pay dearly for what their leaders did, but they just overthrew the leaders that were trying to kill the Israelis for 50 years. Maybe we ought to sit back for a minute and just let them do what they're going to do, and then if it ends up turning out badly, then get involved. But we don't even know what's going on the ground at the moment. They're already making some fairly democratic actions today, withdrawing their forces from the cities and allowing the police to run them, and not only that, saying that they're moving towards a free market economy. Everything is showing right now that they're going to start aligning to the West. But if we continue to bomb every single military asset that they have and allow the Israelis to possibly start pushing deeper and deeper into southern Syria to create a sanitary zone, this will start to create a sour taste in the interim government's minds. And we may easily push the Syrians and create a self-fulfilling prophecy into an anti-Israeli, anti-American mindset and pretty much revert them back to what they were before the Civil War even ended, which is being an anti-Western nation that is backed by the Russians and the Iranians. We want to be...
It would have been wise. It would have been wise to simply stick to the airstrikes on the ISIS strongholds. We started off by doing that, and Israel was doing these airstrikes with the United States. That was a good move. But like you're saying as well, it was not smart to just jump right in. Like, eventually, we might have had to have this response toward the HTS. We might have had to go in and destroy their stuff if they started going sideways. But I even saw today that the U.S. administration is considering taking the HTS off the terrorist watch list, because they were actually on a watch list, apparently, for a long time, actually, for making some certain statements. And there are factions within these rebel groups that say things, but as a whole, though, it looks like they're trying to go pro-Western, or at least that's the appearance of it right now. And you have to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit, because it's preferable to have peace over non-stop war. But the fact that they're considering taking them off of that indicates that they are changing.
Yeah, I would say it certainly does show that they are changing, and it also shows that the United States is trying to align them to the Western world, because I don't know. I see a lot of people making the argument that we ought to just start bombing the rebels. What was the point of the Syrian civil war if we're just going to bomb anyone who's there? Like that's the question. The United States has backed up for 12 and a half years at this point, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Free Syrian Army, and just about any other faction that we could in the area, except for the HTS, in overthrowing Bashar al-Assad. It was our objective as the United States of America to be able to overthrow Assad's regime and create a democratic, secular country in Syria. That was our goal. We have just finally won the civil war, and we got Assad out of power and got the Russians out of Syria. It was a major victory. And now a lot of people's first knee-jerk reaction is, let's start bombing the new people who are in charge of Syria, which doesn't really do anything for us. We just went through all of this effort and time and had all of this patience for 12 years to then immediately treat the new government with such hostility. They really have no other option than to be pro-Iranian and Russian if we keep treating them this way and let it slide. Like, I just don't really think it's a good idea. And while I have been a huge fan of Israel's actions against Iran's proxies, this seems to me to be really overboard, in my opinion. Entirely overboard. We need to see what's going to happen. And I see a lot of people talking about, oh, well, there is no government. There is a government. Yes, it's going to be weak. It's brand new. It takes time for them to solidify themselves. But what's not good is to take a weak government and then make it even weaker by destroying any military abilities they may have in the future to be able to deal with groups like ISIS. That is not a good move, because then we're pretty much leaving them defenseless for the wolves to eat them. And then when the wolves eat them, I know 100% what people are going to be saying. They're going to be saying we failed them, or they're going to be saying, well, the Israelis knew it was coming, and that's why we bombed the rebels into oblivion, because we knew ISIS was going to eat them alive because they didn't have any weapons. I don't really know how this would go, and I've been a big fan of what Israel has done so far, but this feels like it's really starting to destabilize a very fragile diplomatic situation that we would want to see turn towards the Western side, in my opinion. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news about the Syrian government, and we are going to be speaking a little bit about the Israeli occupation down here in the Syrian DMZ. We were able to see some pictures that emerged today showing Merkavas and built-up defensive positions and moving around the roadways of this DMZ. It does appear that they are trying to protect their border area, which of course is within their security interests, and they do have a right to, but still, hopefully they do not continue to go overboard and start pushing Syria away before we could even see if they are going to be pro-Western or not, which it already appears they are going to be moving towards being pro-Western. Also, I'm seeing, I don't know if I have to give like a civil studies class on Syria, because I'm seeing someone yelling, HTS is a terrorist group. The HTS doesn't even exist anymore. The interim government is now controlling the entirety of Syria and is going to be really taking the considerations of everyone involved and forming a new government. The HTS, the Syrian Free Army, and the Druze rebels no longer exist. We are living entirely in a time that is of an interim government. The interim government is going to figure out what the future of Syria is. And it already looks like, just from what they did today as some of their first actions, they're already implementing a very Western-looking economic system. And a very Western economic system requires a somewhat or fairly Western governmental system, meaning that we probably will see a secular or democratic government come out of this. We can't destroy the opportunity before it even exists. We are destroying an ability for Syria to truly become a pro-Western country. And for example, a lot of people aren't knowing this, but the Kingdom of Jordan and also the UAE, Qatar, and Egypt weren't exactly the biggest pro-Israeli people in the past. In fact, Jordan actually invaded Israel a couple of times along with Egypt, and I believe that pretty much everyone in the region was an enemy of Israel at a time. But over time, we slowly allowed new governments to come into power inside of these countries, and we slowly turned them into being pro-Western allies of the United States and also friends of Israel. We cannot always act like every single country that isn't Israel in this region will always be a threat, and we have to bomb them into the Stone Age. Like, I've always been the one for saying, let's go forward and be aggressive against the West's adversaries, but these people look like they actually want to be friends at the moment, and so we ought to give them a little bit to see if they really are going to be friends, and then if they're not, we'll deal with that situation when we get there. But we don't want to jump the gun and then pretty much create a self-fulfilling prophecy where they become anti-Western because of our our anti-Syrian actions that we'd be taking against them before we even really know anything about what they're going to end up creating. But Anyways, with that, we are now going to be moving on out of Syria and up into Ukraine. We're going to be skipping the Turkish news. I'll quickly tell y'all, Turkey did condemn Israel today for the bombing of the military assets and did threaten direct military intervention on the Turkish side if they were to continue these actions against the Syrians, but we'll have to wait and see what that turns into in the long run. But moving on up into Ukraine, we were able to hear a good amount of news today out of Russia and Belarus, as we heard that the Russians are continuing, according to the propaganda figures, to modify a great deal of Oreshniks every single year. And not only that, inside of Belarus, we are also hearing that Belarus claims that they have nuclear weapons under their direct control, according to Lukashenko's statements today. Once again, a violation of the nuclear non-proliferation treaties, and showing us a great deal that the Russians are pretty much moving to nuclear terrorism at this point to try and get their way with the Western world, and also to try and protect the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Moving on from that, we were also able to see that the Ukrainians were able to strike an oil refinery and set the thing on fire. We were able to see this right here. And that's the end of the clip, but very interesting to see, and good to know that they were able to strike another oil depot. Meanwhile, in the Kursk Oblast, the battles have continued, and the Ukrainians have been able to hold their lines, and we were able to get a clip from the 225th that they were able to destroy a Tiger armored car in the Kursk area today, somewhere in between Kromsky Byki and Bolshoi Soldatskoy.
It's toasting. It's like an easy bake oven out here. It's roasting, toasting, and smoldering.
Man, that thing is cooking. And we see that thing cooking up even a little bit more. Delicious. And that's the end of that clip right there, but absolutely wonderful to see and good to know. But moving on from that and out of the area, we're now going to be moving on into our location unknowns, where we're also able to see a Russian tank getting destroyed by an FPV with some goofy music playing over it. I don't know what that music was, but we're going to be muting it.
Some type of kids cartoon or something like Teletubbies.
Maybe. But we now see them hitting the Russian tank. It's still burning. It was already burning before the FPV hit it. And it looks like the fire heated up a little bit more a few minutes later after the FPV slammed into it. And that's the end of the clip right there. And that is really something to see. And I got to say, it's a pretty interesting little deal right there. But we were also able to get the Russian casualty report as well. And it does seem as though things are pretty juicy.
Man, one Bobcat. They got one Bobcat today. Not crazy or anything. I'll be honest, the Bobcat losses have been kind of low recently, but I'll go with one. That's very nice. But unfortunately, tell us more.
Man, I'm telling you, it looks a little juicy today, with 1,350 Russian soldiers wounded and killed over the past 24 hours. It appears that according to Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, there has been a slight downward trend in troop losses, with the 7-day average daily loss at 1,463 for a total of 10,240 Russian soldiers wounded and killed over the week. And according to Miss Disa as well, lower than average totals in the tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery, drones, and vehicles as well. But it still appears that the Ukrainians are getting a good whipping on the Russians for the large part, as 7 APCs were destroyed along with 48 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 3 artillery pieces, 14 drones, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. In general, it does seem as though we are going through the winter trend of decreased casualties as fighting conditions become a lot more difficult, and therefore both sides, while still going as hard as they can, are still decreasing their combat activities overall due to the difficulty of the harsh weather conditions. But moving on into the Vovchansk area, we were able to see some work of the 3rd Brigade in this area today. And check it out. Why, we've got that creep rap. I don't know what that is, honestly.
That's a sick trap beat whenever you hear the xylophone coming in.
Man, I'm telling you. And also, JP on the road asked, should the UN send peacekeepers ASAP into Syria? I would say not. I actually would send U.S. soldiers into Syria if I was the president to ensure the stability of the interim government while they're trying to form and give them the best chance to create a decent government, and also to show them that the United States has their back, because that will have a lot of a molding element on making them pro-Western, because they'll be seeing that the United States is actively there trying to help them secure their interests. And also we'll be putting down ISIS at the same time, which is a pretty important thing.
Wouldn't that be viewed as like an occupation, though, by the Syrian rebel forces, or would they welcome that?
No, we would only do it at their acceptance. We would request to allow U.S. Peacekeepers in the area. If they accept, then we would go in. If they didn't accept, we would stay out. But generally, I think they would accept because they would probably know that the United States is pretty good at counterinsurgency operations, and we would be able to keep ISIS at bay while they're still trying to form their government in this very fragile and precarious time.
Honestly, I would say that I personally would not support sending U.S. soldiers into Syria because even though it sounds good in theory that we would help the Syrian rebels form their new government, that would essentially be viewed by pretty much everybody in the Middle East as an occupation or some type of invasion by U.S. forces, but through diplomatic means. I don't think that would go over well with anybody except for maybe Israel, because Israel's invading themselves, but I don't think that would be good for stability.
I think it would be fine. I mean, we were in Kuwait, we're in Iraq, we're in northern Syria right now in the SDF controlled territories. We're in Saudi Arabia, we're in pretty much anything in the Middle East, we're already in it. So I don't know if anyone would be looking at that as an occupation, especially if we made a diplomatic request to enter the country as peacekeepers and made it very clear that we were peacekeepers and they accepted that. I don't really think that'd look like an invasion. If they said no and then we went in, then that would look like an occupation. But I don't think at all that would look like an occupation in any way, shape, or form with how we would do it. We would do it very diplomatically. But moving on from that and into the Kupiansk area, we were also able to see a Swedish CV-90 in Ukrainian service as well in the area. And these things always look cool. I absolutely love them, and I think they look great. Wonderful stuff. We love them. They're incredible. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see an STRV-122 up in the northern area as well. A Swedish-provided, license-built version of the Leopard 2A5. And we can see it right here. Very nice to see. And Matthew, is the lag getting worse?
Oh yeah, it's getting worse.
Dang. Well, I guess we'll have to move to Plan B probably. But we also got to see the commander of the 54th Brigade inspecting his tank in the SYRIA'S region as well. And we're going to be muting the creepy music. I don't even know what that was. And we can see them looking around the tank, inspecting it for damage. And also really quickly, let me see if I can try and fix this lag situation. Man, I hate that even upgrading the RAM, it just won't fix the situation. That's incredibly unfortunate. But anyways, we can see them showing the tank. It's now on the move. And can you hear me better, Matthew?
I can hear you. Not necessarily better, but I can hear you now.
All right, that's good. Man, I hate what we're going to have to do. It's going to be pretty intensive, work intensive.
It's going to be long-lasting work. It's going to be painful work. It's going to be like being put in Sednaya prison type work.
It's going to be pretty tough for sure. And moving on down into Yenikiheve, we also got to see that a Russian ammunition depot was obliterated today by the Ukrainians as well, which we saw in this clip. Sounds a little toasty. And that's the end of that clip. But moving on from that and into our next one near New York, we also got to see some of the fighting in the area here as well. And we're going to be muting the Chad music. Also, Matthew, is the air conditioner on or the heater on? Hello? Hello? You there? You there? Hello? Hello? You there? Are you there, Matthew?
I'm here now. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yay! Well, I was just asking you, Matthew. I was just wondering. Is the air conditioner on?
I'll have to go check.
Also, your microphone sounds like a million times different. That's really weird.
Better or worse?
Worse. You sound like you're in a tin can now.
Oh, good.
And we can see them throwing what appears to be a thermite grenade into the trench. And you see the Russians getting plastered here. We can also see them throwing a grenade right back out, which explodes outside their dugout.
You know what else exploded outside the dugout? My Wi-Fi. Oh, whoa, I get no respect.
Wait, your Wi-Fi exploded?
Oh, no.
What do you mean, no? You just said that.
I don't think it's exploding.
I can't understand you. Like, the call quality is a little rough, and I'm not knowing what you mean right now. I don't know if Matthew's in the call at the moment or not, but still, we can see the Ukrainians assaulting the Russian position.
They're assaulting the Russian positions like I'm assaulting the mic at this point.
Hey, now the microphone quality's better. What's going on over there, man? Like, I'm confused.
I have no idea. If I had the answers, trust me, I would be implementing the answers. If I had the answers, oh yes, I was right, I was wrong. I'm both at the same time as it possible.
So, is it on your end or my end?
No, it's definitely not on my end. I can tell you that. I keep trying to like rejoin and open the Discord, hoping it's gonna fix something, but nothing changes.
Huh, that's interesting. But moving on from that and out of that area and a little bit further on down and into the area of Inner Hadar, we actually get to see that the Russians, in a very peaceful and democratic way, slammed an FPV drone into the back of an IAEA's inspector's vehicle. And we can see the damage right here. And it doesn't look like they were very friendly to the IAEA. Again, very
You
shocking.
better be lucky they had an armored truck, because it looks like the thing was like surviving a drone strike like that. Like, that's a very heavily armored truck they have.
Yeah, I mean, that thing was pretty beefed up, honestly, and they're kind of lucky that they did have it. Otherwise, they probably would have been cooked. Meanwhile, we did get to hear out of Simferopol, in the middle of the Crimean Peninsula, that there was some explosions that happened. It appears that the city was attacked, although we don't know the exact damage that was caused.
Вон там, пизданул.
Да, только что там находишься, мне интересно.
Да.
Прям вот над нами в 20 метров.
Над нами, сука, в 20 метров пролетел.
Мы его разглядели полностью. Ну как птица. Не, это камикадзе.
Хуй его.
Бля, нахуй, пошли лучше с крыши, я ебал.
Ну въебав он смачно.
Да.
Сколько?
Закинешь, да.
Да.
And that's the end of that clip, but very interesting to see, and hopefully we'll get some more info on that. But without further ado, it's time for us to move on to Kyiv and address the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1021 of the war. And while we wanted a long-lasting speech, we only got a 2-minute and 30-second speech. And so without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Дорогі українці, українки, зараз в Запоріжжі триває рятувальна операція після російського ракетного удару, балістика. По міській забудові 18 людей поранені, всім надається допомога, але, на жаль, є загиблі. Мої співчуття рідним. Вже переговорив з головкомом про те, що потрібно, щоб дати більше безпеки нашим містам. І говоримо з усіма партнерами про додаткові системи ППО. Ми зараз маємо недостатньо систем, щоб захистити нашу країну від російських ракет. Але партнери мають ці системи. Знову і знову повторюємо, що ППО повинна рятувати життя, а не припадати пилом на базах зберігання. Готуємо зараз графік зустрічей та перемовин на цей місяць, щоб зробити якнайбільше. Говорив сьогодні з прем'єр-міністром Польщі Дональдом Туском. Хороша розмова. Україна вдячна Польщі за всю надану підтримку. І це вагома підтримка. Ми маємо так і надалі працювати. Саме разом, щоб обидві наші держави ставали сильнішими. Спланували під час розмови нашу спільну роботу цими тижнями і також в наступному році, коли почнеться головування Польщі в Європейському Союзі. Сьогодні ж говорили з генсеком НАТО Рютте, зокрема про комунікацію з усіма нашими партнерами, про те, як швидше вирішувати питання, які стосуються спільної безпеки усіх нас в Європі. Потрібні сильні гарантії і дієва взаємодія. Сьогодні ж зустрівся з делегацією Європарламенту. Я вдячний усім за підтримку. І ще одне. Відзначив сьогодні наших вчених, 91 вченого, премією Патона. Це щорічна премія. І багато в чому наші люди зараз мають успіхи. Кожне прізвище сьогодні говорить про результати для України. І в обороні, по дронах, ракетах, по нашому виробництву. І в медицині, в сучасних технологіях, які допомагають рятувати життя. І в таких речах, як розмінування, аграрне виробництво і, звичайно, енергетика. Я дякую всім, хто працює для того, щоб Україна вистояла і досягла необхідного. Слава Україні!
And
Heroes Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1021 of the war. And I gotta tell y'all, it's been a fun night getting to cover this news with each and every one of y'all. Oh, it's been having its ups and downs, its lag and its lag-free moments. Matthew, are we lag-free?
We are lag-free for the moment, thank God.
Oh, thank God, mein Gott. But nevertheless, I believe that the lag issue has actually gotten so bad at this point, we're going to have to go with Plan B. Something I didn't want to do. We're going to have to get a new computer.
I have to write something called my struggle, my troubles, my woes.
Excuse me? What? Beyond that, we will have to probably get a new computer to replace this one that we currently have. It's an old workhorse here. It's been working incredibly hard, but sadly, I believe that it's finally reaching its last miles here. This computer has carried me through 1,021 days of running this channel since the war in Ukraine began. But sadly, I think the whole little thing is just getting a little tired, and it just can't keep it up anymore. Poor little thing. I have a great affinity for this thing, and I have a great amount of apprehension and fear for the future because this computer has a lot of things on it that are not transferable. Those intros that y'all see every single night that are custom made, I don't really know if that will be doable on a new computer because we actually tried this a while ago replacing this computer, just about everything, including the video editor that I have on this current computer, cannot be transferred, and nothing inside of it can be transferred either. So I have to build everything from the ground up if I get a new computer. So it's going to be a lot of work, but it looks like we're going to have to go with Plan B because that's really all we have left at this point to possibly fix the lag, and then it might not even be fixed then, and then we just have to keep working with it. Or we have to find out some other fix, like wiring our microphones together, where we're like in some sort of a completely independent thing where we can just hear each other or something along those lines. I'm not really sure, but still.
So where are we going to install the cooling tower? Like, where is that going to go? Like, we got to have at least like a 1 acre plot for that.
Yeah, like we're gonna have a lot of room for this thing. But still, we will have to see what we are doing in the future, and hopefully it will be good. Hopefully it will be good. But nevertheless, we do have loads and loads and loads of questions. Loads of people have been talking in the chat tonight. And also, I got to thank everyone who was here tonight. We had about 8.8 thousand people here at the peak. Actually, it's a smaller night than we've normally been having these days, but it's still a pretty big one at that. And we got to thank everyone who was here tonight watching the stream. And we also have to thank everyone who has subscribed to the channel today as well. We've actually had about 600 subscribers join the channel over the course of the day. And we got to thank each and every one of y'all for enjoying the video that I made today and also watching the stream as well. The video was insanely long. It was about an hour long, about 50 minutes approximately, and it took a lot of work to make that thing. And what's even crazier, believe it or not, y'all, that was done, much like the live streams, in one single take. The whole thing is one giant take. So I hope that y'all enjoyed it. I hope that it was seamless enough that it sounded like it was just multiple takes probably put together in some sort of a video essay, because it was insane the amount of length that thing took. I thought it was about 25 minutes long when I was finished with it, but it was 50. It's the longest video we've ever made on the channel too. So I hope y'all really enjoyed that, because that was something that will probably be only coming that one time, because we generally try and keep the videos far shorter, somewhere around 20 to 30 minutes, or even a little bit less than 20. Still, it is time for us to move on into this next segment, and I hear that a lot of people are speaking about that Lukashenko comment, or as some people like to call him, Lukashenko. But nevertheless, he has said that he has several dozen nuclear missiles ready for his own personal use. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts on this. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it?
All right, so it looks like 49% said Lukashenko is just bluffing because Putin controls the nukes and not him, while 28% said Lukashenko is threatening the West directly with these new nukes that he claims he has, and 15% said Lukashenko is just informing folks. And this was not just informing people. There was an intent behind it. And I think Lukashenko was threatening the West, like Putin likes to do. But I think that Lukashenko really doesn't have the authority to launch those nukes. I think those are under Putin's control. And Lukashenko is like the child being lended the toy. They can't use the toy without the parent's permission. And the parent here is Putin. So I would say I'm with the 49%. It's just a bluff because Putin is in charge. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my honest opinion, that I believe that it is a bluff. I think the Belarusians are just saying that to create a diplomatic incident, or for some reason a feeling of self-grandeur for Lukashenko. He's trying to make himself feel special, one or the other. I still highly doubt that nuclear weapons are under direct Belarusian control, as I believe the Russians would be very scared to give nuclear weapons to pretty much a puppet state of the Russian Federation. They never did it in Soviet times, so why would they do it now? Makes no sense. And also some people are going to be saying, but there were nukes in Ukraine. They weren't a puppet state. They were a part of the Soviet Union. So that was a whole individual country. Made up of different states, sure, but it was one country. They never gave nuclear weapons to East Germany or Poland or Czechoslovakia or Hungary or any of those countries. Never gave any nuclear weapons to them. So that's what I'm saying. Based off of the historical precedent, they would not do that. I just don't think they would. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the questions. And Matthew, I understand that we have a great deal of questions that pertain to planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yes, indeed. So we are moving on to our final super chat segment of the night, and this one goes to Becky Tanner, who puts in a $40 donation, and thank you very much, Becky, for that very generous support. And she said, "I just want to say thank you for your hard work, and you two are awesome."
And thank you for enjoying the hard work, Becky. And thank you for saying that we're awesome. Y'all are awesome, actually, for watching this channel and enjoying it. Because I just ramble. I ramble loads. I was rambling before I came on this stream about crazy stuff. Y'all wouldn't believe it. I was actually talking about the United States of America internally before I got on the stream. And I was talking about how this nation works on a bureaucratic level. It was a very interesting kind of a discussion. But it was a fun one that I had nonetheless. Beyond that, though, I do have to thank you so much for enjoying this channel and enjoying the work that we put into this thing, because we always put a load of effort and heart and soul into this thing to make it possible. Not really to make it possible, but to make it fun and to make it interesting and really informative for all of y'all. That's something that a lot of people really can't balance. Either it's very informative and it's not really fun, or it's way too fun and not really informative at all, or it's not even informative or fun and it's just someone whining and complaining in front of a computer and then making, aw, man, noises to like 20 people, which there is a group out there like that. But we are happy to know that you enjoy this channel a great deal, and I thank you so much for the kind words, and I also thank you for supporting the channel too, because that support helps us to make this thing possible, and it helps us to continue to keep our lights on, pay the bills, and work on incredibly cool projects, sick projects, really neat projects, long-lasting projects that give people a smile on their face and make them proud to be citizens of the Republic. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and also get this, we actually have some breaking news coming out tonight during the stream, which is always a good thing. We love to say breaking news right in the middle of the question segment, and this is about South Korea. I just saw on Twitter that according to a reliable source, the South Korean police have raided President Yoon's office over his martial law declaration, and and apparently the chief of police has been arrested by the South Korean police. So it looks like the situation was definitely not over yet, and right now the president just got raided. So it's unclear if he was in the office when it was raided, but whatever the case is, they did apparently take some evidence away, and it looks like they're coming after Yoon. So it's just beginning, and it looks like this situation is just starting. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, it sounds as though they aren't just going to let him say Dear citizens of the Republic of Korea, my bad, signed Yoon Suk Yeol. I think he's going to actually have some punishment coming down the line, some criminal punishment possibly. And it sounds as though the National Assembly is not going to forgive and forget. They're going to put him in prison. It sounds like Yoon Suk Yeol tours prison. Or something like that. They ought to make a movie like that, Matthew. Yoon the Loon goes to prison, or something along those lines. It will be a great movie, a sitcom even in South Korea.
Indeed, and some said he's the pride of the SNU, Sun Woo. Some say it was him, and they just renamed him to Yoon, if you get the reference. Also, Squid Game's coming out sometime. We're not plugging Squid Game. We're not sponsored by them, but it is coming out sometime later. Some people speculate that maybe all this trouble in South Korea is simply Squid Game promo, and it'll be soon revealed that it's just the Squid Game producers behind all this all. But I really doubt that's the case, but I think Squid Game might be the entire country before long. It seems like it's going that way.
Man, before you know it, man, the South Koreans are going to be giving them the Squid Game punishment, you know? Like, at least they might, you know, they probably put them in prison, honestly, but, you know, you never know. You never know.
Giving them a whole lot of red light and no green light.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it'd be crazy. You know, the last time the South Koreans got this angry was that time that we landed on that little island near Seoul, actually near Incheon, and we actually got in this whole war with them, the United States did, for like a couple of days. Like, I think about a dozen Americans died, but hundreds of not hundreds of North Koreans, hundreds of Koreans died. Did you know about that, Matthew? Did you know about that whole thing? We actually went to war with the Kingdom of Korea at a time.
I have to believe you on because I didn't hear the whole middle part of that because of the lag, but I believe you.
Oh, it's time to talk about the Joseon expedition. We got to talk about that Joseon expedition because this is it right here. The Korean expedition. Look at that, Matthew. The brave soldiers of the Republic standing on board one of our gunboats, holding, interesting enough, one of the colors of the forces that were sent against us near Incheon. Can you believe that?
That's pretty interesting. I was trying to figure out what that is on the flag right there. I can't really tell.
I can't really tell either. It's a very interesting thing. but nevertheless, this was a very interesting time in American history. You see, we actually went up against the Kingdom of Joseon, which is officially what Korea was before it got split into North and South Korea. Well, actually, it was what it was before it got colonized by Japan. But then, you know, after that, it turned into North and South Korea. We actually went to war with them for an entire month and 2 days. Pretty interesting stuff.
Damn.
Yeah.
And the result was inconclusive. Like, nobody knows what happened here.
Oh, I know what happened. I actually know the story. So what happened was that there was a merchant ship called the General Sherman that went missing around Korea. It was an American vessel crewed by Americans. And so we said, oh my, what happened to that? Ship went missing? We ought to go take a look. Also, by the way, while we're at it, we might as well do the same thing we did with the Japanese, which is tell them, open your nation to trade or be fired upon. So we were like, that's a cool idea. Let's go do it. So we sent off the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marines to go and deal with this incident. So what they did is that they landed on an island. I believe it was Gangwa Island, which is in Incheon. And let me see if I can show you exactly. Oh, yeah, here it is, right here. So we landed on this island right here, this big one right here, and we landed on it and we sat there. We were like, where are they at? Bring them forward. Where are the dignitaries? Because we were thinking it would go like the Japanese, where they would come forward and we'd be like, open up the trade or get shot at. And then they opened up the trade and then started figuring out what the world was like outside of Japan. Turns out the South Koreans were a little different. They came up and went, oh, you're here for that boat, aren't you? You're here for that boat full of Americans? Oh, we killed them all. Because at the time, it was actually the law in the Kingdom of Joseon that foreigners were not allowed in the country, and any foreigner that stepped foot on the Kingdom of Joseon soil was put to death. So every single one of the sailors on board the General Sherman was put to death by the Kingdom of Joseon. So at that point, the United States Navy and the Marine Force that was there didn't really like that much, so they ended up blasting away. And the the Kingdom of Korea tried to push us off the island. We didn't get pushed off of the island. We just kept slaughtering them, to be entirely honest. The Koreans actually estimate we took out about 350 of their soldiers. We estimate we actually took out less at around 243. But nevertheless, we only ended up losing about 3 killed and 10 wounded, so it was a pretty one-sided battle. We then finally said, listen, like, we're not going to be here forever. Will you just open up to trade and also apologize for killing all of those Americans? And they said no, and then we said, all right, pack it up, boys, it's done, and then we just left. And that's why the results were inconclusive.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And also, by the way, I saw that Jun Kong from the live chat, he said that word on that flag right there is a Chinese word for general.
Interesting. That's very interesting indeed. But still, it's a very interesting little incident in American history, and one that's never talked about. But beyond that, it's a very interesting kind of a story. But beyond that, I was just bringing it up because that would not be the first time that the South Koreans have had issues when it's not the North Koreans. But anyways, or the Japanese. But still, thank you so much for the support. I hope that has addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Mac Account, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mac Account, for that support. And I don't see a comment attached to it, sadly, but thank you very much for supporting our channel and helping us keep on running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to thank you greatly for helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support means a great deal. And I got to thank you massively for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running, Mac Account, because that is your first super chat ever to this channel. Not a lot of people make their first super chat to this channel, and the few that do usually start to support the channel regularly. And I got to thank you so much once again for being one of those people who decided that the channel was worthwhile to support and helping it to keep on running, because no one has to support the channel, but nevertheless to support is important to keeping this channel alive and rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that addresses that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
Internet goes to Paladin Cards, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Paladin, as well, for that support. He said, I listen to you guys every night, and thank you for all the updates.
And thank you so much for enjoying the updates, and thank you for watching this channel every single night. That's one hell of a commitment. I'm not gonna lie right there. And I gotta say, thank you so much for just listening to it every single night, Paladin Cards. That is your 5th super chat, by the way, and I gotta thank you for massively helping out this channel and keeping it running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep giving all these updates. And so, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Robert McCann, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Robert, also for that very generous support. He said, fair. He said, work has been a lot during these times, and I'm glad for the work that you both put into the channel and LSA, and also, how do you think the U.S. should respond to the China war game?
I believe that we should respond somewhat assertively by once again conducting freedom of navigation exercises through the middle of the Taiwan Strait, and at the exact same time, I believe that we should start to give a lot more anti-ship and anti-air weaponry to the Taiwanese to help them to defend the island a lot better in a preemptive Chinese strike. I think that would be very important going on into the future, that we continue to show that we are behind the Taiwanese and will back them up in an armed confrontation against the Chinese. A position of strength is a lot better than a position of weakness, because while people generally are scared whenever it looks like we're about to go to war, going forward and showing a strong front is a lot better than being weak-spined and then allowing a bad situation to happen that we then have to react to, and really honestly, it's a far worse situation than the original one we were faced with. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Alan Mellon, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Alan as well for that support. And he said, take a question from the chat. And we shall, Alan. And once again, big thank you for that support. And the question sponsored by Alan from the live chat is going to go to Shabos, who says, will Israel take over Damascus?
I have not heard that they will, and I do not believe that they would, in my opinion. And that's my opinion. I have to say my opinion on that one, because I don't really know. And I think that would be going that would be going way too far at that point for the Israelis to take Damascus. I don't think they'd do it. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Jacob Hawley, who puts in a 20 also. Huge shout out to Jacob for that support. He said, Syria must adopt democratic reforms and market reforms and give us bases. And my friend in the IDF says that the new Syrian government must cede all land south of Damascus to Israel because the Torah gives it to them.
I thank you for the support, Jacob Hawley, and I would say we shouldn't really tell Syria what they must do at all. That's generally my stance at the moment, and honestly, I need to change my map to reflect the interim government and the SDF at this point. But nevertheless, I don't think that we should be dictating anything to the Syrians right now. The Syrians, really through their own abilities, have just fought a long and bloody civil war that lasted 12 years, and they're going to be trying to create a new country in this area. Hopefully one that will be pro-Western, and it looks like it's going that way right now. But I do not think for a minute, given what we're seeing, and it seems as though they're already leaning pro-Western, we do not want to go in and be heavy-handed and bomb them or force them to do things or make them give us pretty much tributes in the form of bases. We want everything to be very gentle and kind to them. Kindness speaks a great deal, and there's always a very large argument to say that winning over the hearts and minds of the people is far better than forcing them to do something. Forcing them to do something only creates animosity and will build a strong base that is against us, and we eventually have to fight itself to try and maintain what we took. We want to have a great deal of patience with the Syrians, and that's something that a lot of people are not really getting from me, and I've seen it tonight, and I think I may be showing a little bit of frustration with it, because a lot of people always know me as the person who says the West has to strongly assert itself and pretty much show down our foes with the strongest military force possible without going to war. And if we have to go to war, we will, because at that point we must. But at the same time, a lot of people know me to be the strong kind of bullheaded type that really wants to take a situation by the horns and show down our adversaries. In this situation, it's a completely different one, and I'm not someone who says, oh, we have to be aggressive and mean to every single country we deal with. Each situation is different, and we have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. And with the Syrians right now, these people truly do look like they want a peace, and they want a new government that will be largely keeping the peace the best they can. They're already creating an interim government that appears to be leaning in a democratic direction. They are working towards creating a free market economy inside of their country, which is a very Western economic model. They also appear to have a large amount of factions and members involved in the interim government that are wanting to create a secular democratic form of government. It looks as though everything's moving in the direction of being pro-Western. We don't need American bases in Syria. We already have American bases in Turkey and Saudi Arabia, so we pretty much have the entire region locked down just with that fact alone. Putting bases in Syria or forcing our bases into Syria wouldn't really be that good of a move, and we already have a few inside of northern Syria, and we really don't want to impose ourselves on the interim government and give them a bad opinion of us right off the bat. As far as the other situation goes, I would have to say that the friend in the IDF who says that the Syrian government must cede all of the land south of Damascus, we don't work in that kind of world anymore. That's not how we work. We don't say because Putin can pull a map out of his, not to say this in a very crass way, but because he can pull a map out of his ass that was drawn up by a Russian in 1550 that showed slivers of Ukraine as a part of Russia, they own Ukraine. We don't take that kind of stuff seriously anymore. Neither do we take religious claims either as precedent over international law. Nations are supposed to respect each other's sovereign borders, and the instance or the idea that because the largely state religion of Israel dictates that land should be theirs, so they're going to take it because that's what they want, that's not right. That is a violation of international law, and the borders of the Syrian Republic should be respected, as we respect any other borders. Saying that this belongs to them because a religious text claims that it belongs to them is pretty much legitimizing the Russian claims to Ukraine because some of the people there happen to speak Russian. That would be almost the same kind of a basis of a claim. There is no reason to do that. While back in the day, we may have said that might makes right, and anyone who's able to take a area of land by force and keep it that way can have it. We don't work that way anymore. It's not that kind of a world that we live in. We live in a world that is supposed to be making sure to maintain the peace, and there's no way that the peace is going to be maintained by saying that we should push in and take the place, just because a religious text says so. Now, I believe, if I'm correct, I believe that's also what some radical Islamic factions say as well, such as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria that's popping up right now. They claim that the Quran allows them to pretty much create a new Islamic caliphate. We don't work off of that kind of stuff anymore on any level, and and also some people are misinterpreting this as saying that your friend is speaking on the behalf of the IDF. This isn't the IDF speaking. This is someone who is in the IDF saying their opinion. And I would have to strongly stand against that opinion because it's a violation of international law and it's very self-serving to Israeli interests while making a severe detriment to Western and American interests at large. That is, of course, hopefully, I would hope, and it does appear that it's the case, that's certainly not at all the actual statement or the position of the Israeli government or the IDF at large, but those kinds of opinions are what continuously breeds war, is the idea that because of something, some sort of a claim that is made up over time, people have to take something from someone else and keep it in the modern world. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And also that will only breed more conflict in the region, and that will clearly turn the Syrians anti-Western and anti-Israeli simply because the West allowed the Israelis to do something like that, if that was the case. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But I just can never stand with something like that. Matthew, do you want to throw in a comment on that?
Me personally, I would say that Syria should be given a chance to govern themselves. Like I've said before, with them coming out of such a brutal dictatorship, and once again, the people taking over are not saints. Like, nobody's trying to pretend that they're saints. They were on a terrorist watch list, but at the same time, if they're showing evidence of changing and they are going to be good, or at least somewhat pro-Western, like the enforcers also saying, we should not go in preemptively and just make assumptions that they're not going to act right and start invading their territory. Because remember, in the midst of all this chaos are Syrian civilians, and ultimately those civilians are the ones that pay the price the most when things like this happen, like invasions. They're the ones paying the price. So they really didn't deserve this right off the bat. And once again, I'm not saying that I don't support Israel. I'm not saying that Israel should be punished, but they should have taken a more conservative approach to this instead of going in guns blazing, because so far going in guns blazing leads to more conflict in the Middle East, and that should be calmed down to the best extent possible. And it looks like right now Israel has 4 wars going on 4 different fronts, which is honestly not something that's desirable. And this one could have been avoided if they just simply took a less aggressive approach. So I would say that they kind of stepped in it here, but we'll have to see how it goes from this point forward.
And also, I just saw really quickly to address another one. Someone said Israel's fine to take what it needs to protect itself. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here and then apply the metric the other way. I don't know if it'll help, but maybe it'll help to make the connection here. If that is true, then Russia has every right to keep everything that they have right now in Ukraine. Because for the Russian mindset, they're protecting themselves from Ukraine becoming a part of NATO. So keeping the war going on forever, pretty much endlessly slaughtering Ukrainian civilians, and also illegally occupying territory that is not theirs and is not recognized by any other country but themselves, is 100% verified because they're simply protecting themselves from the wicked favored ways of the West. That is not how it works. The Russians had no right legally to invade Ukraine and control the territory that they have now, and they have no right to continuously commit war crimes against the Ukrainian people and also against the Ukrainian military to be able to try and hold this land because they believe that NATO is a existential threat to them. This was an entirely an illegal invasion and not justified by any means. No matter how many different ways or how many different versions of hurdles and gymnastics the Russians have tried to do to justify this invasion, it makes no sense. The Israelis cannot say, because we believe we're in danger, we can do anything we want and it's totally acceptable. That is a very silly way, in my opinion, of looking at things, and that is very hypocritical when we're talking about any other country versus Israel. Israel cannot just go around doing whatever they want. They have had a very clear and rational approach to what they did when dealing with Hamas and also with Hezbollah. Those were very justified actions, and those were actions of self-defense, very clearly from the outset because of the massacres that happened on October 7th of 2023, where 2,000 Israeli civilians ended up losing their lives because of an attack that was created by Hamas. Everything else that happened after that was a result of that direct action, aggressed upon them by an external faction supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran. just by saying the Israelis feel a little scared because the Assad regime, which wanted them dead, just collapsed, and now a new government's coming forward that might actually be friendly to the Syrians. Like, for example, the Syrian Free Army was literally putting out a open hand and saying, we would love to have some help from the Israelis, and we like to view them as friends. That makes no sense to treat those people as hostile off the bat, because they've already shown that they want to be friendly to the Israelis. And you can't always just say, I don't know what it is, because when we say this kind of a thing about Turkey, just because you have a bias or a preference for a country does not mean that every single action they do is right. I'm a huge American patriot. I love the United States of America, and I think it's the greatest country on the world. But that does not mean that every single action that the United States takes, I'm going to be 100% behind and justify. Some of the actions are not really necessary, like the invasion of Iraq. And looking at it in hindsight, there wasn't really a lot of proof of the Iraqis making weapons of mass destruction. It didn't really seem like a justified invasion, but we still did it at the time. I can get why they did it then, but looking in hindsight, I don't really agree with the decision. Still doesn't change the fact that I love the United States and I'm a pro-American and a patriot, but it's looking at reality. That's the thing. Like, you can't sit there because you like Israel and say everything they do is justified, and because you hate Israel say everything they do is wrong. I'm 100% in support of American and Western interest. I generally look at what the Israelis have been doing fighting Iranian proxies to be 100% within Western interest, and support that wholeheartedly. But already starting to roughshod the Syrians just because they're a little scared at the moment, and we don't even know what's going to come out of Syria here in the next few months, that's being incredibly rash and proactive to the point that it doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, and like, I keep on trying to explain this and like try and get my point across, and sometimes I feel like some folks, not a lot of people, but some folks in the chat, just, it's like talking to a brick wall, because no matter what, Israel is just always going to be justified in whatever they do. And while they have been up to this point, I feel like this is starting to cross the line. This is a lot like what Turkey did pushing into Syria in the first place, which many of y'all know I have been very strongly against. They pushed in and they crushed the Kurds in northern Syria, which was 100% a violation of the civil war and also against American and Western interest. It did not matter, and I could give a damn if Turkey is a part of NATO or if they consider themselves to be Western leaning. That was 100% against our interests in the region, and I could care less what they call themselves. That should have been condemned, and it should have been condemned a lot more strongly than it was. This is something that I believe is almost in the exact same vein at this point as what the Turks did in northern Syria. This is once again starting to cause issues in the region. It is keeping the old blood burning to where these conflicts will never die, because crazily enough, like, people go, oh, look at Assad, he, hates the Israelis, which he did. And you could see that 100%. And it was a big issue, and we wanted to take care of it, because not only did he hate Israel, he hated the United States. So now he's finally gone, and we finally have a chance to work with new people in the region. This is our only shot and our only hope to reach out to them, become friends with them, and align to the Western world. And what we're going to do is instead shun them and treat them like garbage to the point that they really have no one else to turn to but their old allies, the Iranians and the Russians. This is a brand new era. We have to treat it like a brand new situation. This isn't Assad. This isn't the Syrians that wanted Israel dead for 50 years. This is a brand new group of people that may become great friends with the West or even lukewarm allies like Iraq or Kuwait. And this is a situation that we should not be trying to throw away just because people have an inherent bias against the Syrians and for the Israelis. That's my honest opinion of that. I don't think I can put that any other way. And also, I'm seeing, let's see, Matthew, I see that you're addressing something in the chat. Would you like to take a little moment to address it yourself?
Well, I was going to say that you can, like, for example, we are allied with Israel. I personally support Israel pretty much everything they do, because they're mainly defending their country. Like, they're doing things that seem brutal to some people, but most of the things Israel does is justified in self-defense. I will say, though, this is one of the instances right here, one of the rare instances where I will have to say I don't agree with Israel, what they're doing in Syria right now. And you can still be in support of Israel and call out something that is wrong, because even friends or allies need to check each other occasionally and keep each other in checked and balanced at the same time. And if we just let Israel do whatever they want and provide no pushback whatsoever, then that's not really a friendship. That's very one-sided, and Israel must get their way or else. That's really not a friendship or an ally right there. So I would say that Israel, hopefully they will back off a little bit. Maybe there is hope that maybe Israel can still have diplomatic relations with the rebels and maybe salvage the situation. But I just don't think that this was the right way to go about it. I don't want to beat the point to the ground, but there's nothing wrong with saying that Israel might have been overstepping here, and you don't have to like totally renounce your support for Israel just because you disagree on this one thing.
Also, one more thing I want to address. Someone said, oh, well, have you ever lived in a tiny country that's surrounded by nations that want to kill you? There are no nations that surround Israel right now that directly want to kill them. The Egyptians are neutral to them and are indifferent. The Jordanians, the Kingdom of Jordan, which pretty much borders most of Israel, is actually friends with them and has helped to defend their airspace in the past against 2 Iranian attacks. I don't really call that a country wanting to kill you. It sounds like a country that's actually helping you out. The Lebanese government is just inept and incompetent, and the only reason why it looks like Lebanon is anti-Israeli is because the Iranians have continued, because of the Assad regime, to continue to flood money and guns to Hezbollah in Lebanon, thanks to the Assad government, that every single one of these rebel factions was there to put down, and they were completely against what Assad was doing in support of Hezbollah. Now, with all that in mind, who in the world around Israel right now, except for the Iranian proxies in Lebanon and the Gaza Strip, are trying to kill them? Not a single one of them. Jordan isn't, Egypt isn't, the Lebanese government really isn't, although you could make an argument there kind of are, because Hezbollah is almost the government inside of Lebanon, and Syria sure as hell isn't, because they're trying to figure out what their country is even going to look like, because it ceased to exist a couple of days ago. No one's trying to kill them. So Israel going gung-ho into this situation when it could end up just fine, and going in there and saying, we are going to take care of our interests, we are going to do this, or else. That doesn't really make a great deal of sense to me. And also, someone said, is this a pro-Israel channel? Not really. This is a pro-American channel, so we don't really view things from a pro-Ukrainian or a pro-Israeli perspective. We view it more so what's in the interest of the United States, which largely is in the collective interest of the Western world, possibly including your country. I don't know which one you're from, but if Israel's actions are in support of the West and the United States, I'm for it. If it's not in support of the West and the United States, I'm not for it. That's how we always work on this channel. I don't start splitting the hairs and going, oh, well, I really have like a big bias to Israel, so everything they do is going to be justified even if it works against America. Hell no. That's something I'll never work off of. If Israel does stuff just like Turkey has done that is against America's interests, I'm not a big fan of that. And I have a feeling that at this point, this stuff is starting to largely work against American interests, because right now, if y'all don't know, the United States government is currently working on providing billions of dollars, as well as a great deal of on-the-ground civil support to try and help the Syrians form this new government. We are actively getting in there and trying to make them friends, while the Israelis are going out of their way to bomb them. And eventually, the Syrians are going to either have to just ignore the Israeli bombings, which isn't going to happen, or they're going to have to confront them and then start treating the West hostilely because the West keeps bombing them through Israel, which that won't end up turning out well for us on a diplomatic level. Maybe it'll work out well, maybe it won't, but I have a feeling that we need to approach this situation diplomatically first before we start resorting to bombing the brand new interim government. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one here. This one, and also real quick, I'm not going to beat this point to the ground. I'm not the type to beat points into the ground, but I have to address something I'm seeing in the live chat here. And of course, like, you're free to your opinion. If you are pro-Israel all the way and you don't care what they do, it's a free country. Believe that if you want. I'm personally not that way. I will always judge things objectively, no matter who it is. Even if I support them most of the time, I will always say when they're wrong. But I do see someone here saying, do you listen to Netanyahu? He's a 100% open to peace. Apparently not, because the rebels, and once again, the rebels are not saints, but the rebels offered diplomatic talks with Israel, and Netanyahu responded by launching attacks on every air force and also naval asset that the Syrians had at their disposal. That's not exactly what you call a nice response to a diplomatic offer, and you know that was really what you call jumping to conclusions based on assumptions that the rebels were going to go anti-Western and anti-Israel, which we really don't know right now at the moment. It's kind of on the fence. So no, Netanyahu stepped in it on this one, in my opinion, and he is open to peace sometimes, but in this one, he didn't seem like he was too open to peace, at least right now, but maybe that'll change. But anyways, moving on from that, and moving on to our next super chat, this one goes to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, AMX10, and they said, Syria is free, dance with the glee. Syria is free, dance with the glee. I just got back from a football dance party in another part of New Zealand, and I caught up on your recent streams about Syria, and great coverage.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying the coverage. A lot of people were really enjoying the coverage a great deal. Loads of people were actually watching that stuff, more so than normal. I think a couple of our videos got 400 and 600,000 views, and that was a huge topic when it was happening. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and really being happy that Syria is free. That's something that a lot of people aren't really realizing at this point. Bashar al-Assad and the Assad regime is gone. It's been there for 50 years, since the 70s. It's finally gone, and we're seeing a new dawn and a new age, and I'm happy to see it for the Syrians. They've been fighting a very long time for this, and hopefully their new government will be able to be democratic and secular, and it will join the Western alliance in the region of the Middle East. I'm hoping, and I like to be hopeful and optimistic, because in times like these, there's no reason to be pessimist about them. We don't even really know a lot about what this interim government's really going to be doing. Anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, Enforcer, I'm just curious real quick. Can we do a quick investigation into Israel? I have a hunch about something that people may not want to hear. Can we pull up what is Israel's main industries? Where do they derive most of their GDP from?
Well, let's see. What are Israel's main industries? Let's see here. Let's take a look. The economy of Israel. So here we go. And the population is nearly 10 million. So the entirety of Israel is just a little bit bigger than New York City. Let's see, their GDP is 531 billion. And it's actually slowing in growth. Let's see here. GDP per capita is actually pretty high. It's about equivalent to the poorest state in America, which is West Virginia. And that actually sounds like an insult. That's actually not. The United States just has an insanely high GDP per capita. So that's actually pretty good right there. But let's see. Their GDP by sector, services make up 69.5% of the entire economy.
Wow, that's shocking. And services are what, like tourism?
I don't know. Let's try and see if they have a breakdown here of their economic output. Let's see. Challenges, data. Okay, we want to skip this. We want to move on. Let's see. Financial services. Let's see here. High technology. This thing's always looked cool. Like, I'm not going to lie. I've always seen that thing. It's always looked incredibly cool. But let's see here. We want to find out about, let's see. Wow, they spend 5% of their GDP every year, at least in 2009, on imports of energy products. That's actually pretty significant. Let's see here. Recent discoveries, electricity. We want to know about their service. Okay, so here's their industry. Industry is the next biggest thing compared to services. So what do they have? Let's see here. They have the diamond industry, and then there's defense contracting.
Okay, yeah, defense contracting. So let's see here. Let's see, accounting for 10% of the world total. Israel's one of the world's major exporters of military equipment. Now, one thing that people never want to recognize is that even though most civilians are anti-war, like nobody likes war, nobody wants it, there is always an economic factor to causing wars. And what the Israelis have done here have made me wonder, do the Israelis really want to end all wars in the Middle East? Or do they want to keep one maybe running or going in the background so that way they can keep their defense industry running? That's something that the U.S. does. We're perfectly aware the U.S. does that. That's always a consideration. There's a major defense lobby in the United States making sure that there is always a place to sell weapons and also a need for war, basically. And I wonder, and I actually don't wonder, I know, Israel has the same thing going on. They have the same type of lobby like that, and I wonder how much that really plays into the decision of what's been done in Syria.
I wouldn't know. It's an interesting point, though, because it could be an economic factor that simply, for the Israelis, that is, war is maybe a profitable venture. And unlike many other countries, the Russians are not enduring a profitable venture fighting in Ukraine. Neither does really anyone else in a war. But with the Israelis generally being a smaller country, but still making a large amount of their money off of arms exports, this might end up just being a way for them to advertise products and then sell them to countries that would wish to have Israeli exports. Maybe a kind of a business that they have, or it may be the business that they know that destabilization of the region will create a remilitarization of some countries, and they'll be looking to buy new military equipment. It could be something along those lines. But Still, that is something a little important to consider, is that they are a fairly large arms producer and exporter of a country, and so it may make a little bit of sense for them to be able to go ahead and maybe do preemptive and aggressive actions like this, not even just for export, just for the fact of the Israeli government largely subsidizing these companies through continued contracting to keep them alive, or keep them profitable. That might be another thing as well. You never know. But still, I would generally have to go with the idea that regardless of the actual motivations of Israel, which we would have to figure out over time, kind of like it took a while for me to figure out what Turkey's motivations in the world are by just watching hours and hours of documentaries and reading about them. It probably will be the same thing for the Israelis to try and figure out what actually makes them tick. That might be a part of it. It might be something else. But now I'm seeing some people calling them warmongers, and they haven't been warmongers. That's a bit too, like, brash to say, because they weren't at war with anyone until Hamas attacked them in October 27th of 2023. Then they went ham, and they went ham with a good reason. But this right here, with what they're doing in Syria, I'm not going to call the Israelis warmongers, and I'm not going to make it sound like we're anti-Israeli now. I'm still pro-Israeli because they deal with Iranian proxies incredibly well. But at the same time, though, that doesn't mean that I'm going to always turn a blind eye to things I don't like. And this is one of the things I do not like, is watching the Syrians start beating up a brand new interim government that's trying to create a new country. And also I see some people saying, oh, well, just because it's an interim government, they have, like, no control. They might as well just beat the shit out of them. Like, oh, is that what y'all would have wanted to happen to the United States when we were a brand new country that had an interim government from 1783 all the way up to 1787? We had an interim government for 5 years, pretty much. Would you have liked for, I don't know, Britain to come back and beat our ass again? Or just start obliterating the colonies just because they could? I mean, like think about that. If you were in the shoes of any other country that has formed in the past, would you just like for your neighbors to come around and just start kicking your head in, like, just because they can and because they think you might not turn out to be a good country? Like, isn't that kind of a little judgmental? Like, like, we have no reason to think that they're going to turn out to be horrific people yet. I mean, like, sure, they might not be secular. They're still working on a free market economy. That says a lot. They might end up being an Islamic emirate, and Jordan is one. I mean, hell, Jordan's like one of Israel's biggest allies in the region right now, and it's practically an Islamic emirate itself. So if they can be an ally of Israel's as an Islamic emirate, why couldn't Syria? Why in the world are we acting like because it might end up being an Islamic emirate, which isn't exactly ideal, it has to be an enemy of the West? We are already allies with plenty, Saudi Arabia being the biggest one, and they seem to do us just fine in the region.
And also, what was the main things that Israel was looking to do? They wanted to stop the reconstitution of ISIS. That was objective one. And objective two is they wanted to cut off the corridor for Iran to be able to ship weapons over to the enemy forces, the proxy forces in Lebanon and other places as well. And the best way to do that, could you imagine if Israel went to the rebels and said, yes, we would love a meeting and we would love to work with you to ensure your security and ensure our security, and we'll work together as partners and provide stuff to each other to make sure that we can be good partners in this. And imagine if the rebels, who are a new government, seeing an opportunity to basically build up their own defenses, they would obviously agree to that and think, well, hell, we can be friends with the Israelis, have our own independent government that we're in control of, and only thing they're asking in return is to stop Iranian shipments. And that's basically letting the Israelis come in and bomb the Iranians if they try to take more stuff through Syrian territory. So that would be a win-win for everybody. But under the current thing here, I just really don't see a scenario where the rebels are going to once again come back to the Israelis and say, okay, do you want to have a partnership? Because I just don't see it. They've already burned the bridge.
Yeah, it's just not a good thing. Like, oh man, there's so many instances where we don't burn bridges. When we were in Afghanistan, folks, we knew that half of everyone that the U.S. Army was dealing with was probably Taliban. We didn't go around dropping napalm on villages in Afghanistan for that reason. Like, we would still try and win over the hearts and minds and have very, very strict rules of engagement to try and make sure that we mitigated collateral and tried to keep the Afghan citizenry on the U.S. side and on the side of the new Afghan government. That's how you have to do everything. Like, I know that I always talk about being strong and going forward and really smacking folks around like the Russians and the Chinese, but those are people we already know are our adversaries and rivals. If they're not our adversaries or rivals yet, there's no reason to go with a warlike stance up to them and start being aggressive on them already. We got to give them time. we don't know anything about these people. And I know a lot of people keep on bringing up the HTS. And yeah, they're not a great group, and we already knew that when they started to push into Aleppo and down to Haman Oms. We knew that. But when we're talking about now they've all merged together, except for the STF, into an interim government, and you've got loads of people now who are now melded in with the HTS in this interim government that are looking for a secular democratic government. We don't know what's going to come out of that. I mean, there could be a compromise like we saw in the United States, where we didn't have an issue of religion in the United States or whether it would be secular or non-secular. Everyone kind of agreed it was going to be secular. Well, actually, no, actually, it was not agreed upon. I forgot about that because each colony largely had a different religion. Pennsylvania was made up of Quakers. Massachusetts was still made up of largely puritanical kind of people. Georgia was made up of largely Baptist Protestants, even at that time. And a lot of people were trying to figure out what was the official religion of the United States going to be. And because there were so many different factions with so many conflicting answers as to what the official religion or official sect of Christianity the nation should be, the government decided, everyone decided, all of the delegates did, that it would just be better for them to respect religious practices in general and just have a government that did not recognize or promote any specific religion, but just tolerated the practice of any religion. That's what we came up with. I mean, someone in Europe, let me think. What would have been a power that would have come over here and tried to crush us at the time? I don't know, Spain, because they were still in the area. Spain could have gone, doesn't look like they're turning into Catholics. Looks like they might be radical Puritans. Let's go and invade America now while we can. Like, that's like rash. It doesn't even allow time to figure out what we would become. And that's what I'm saying. Let's just give these people some time. I'm not saying we have to leave them alone and treat them like babies and coddle them forever. I mean, if they turn into some sort of a radical Islamic state, yeah, then we'll have to go in and put them down. But we don't know if they're going to do that yet, and it looks like they're not. So let's not burn the bridge before the bridge is even built. Let's let them build the bridge, and then if they burn it, then we'll deal with that. But if they build a bridge and they put their hand out to shake, we're going to shake it because we want people in the Western world. And they'll sure as hell probably turn, if they go the Western path, into a fine country just like any other, just like Jordan or Kuwait or the UAE or Qatar or Saudi Arabia. They won't be perfect, but they'll be pretty okay. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, some people in the live chat are seeing this. Someone literally asked the question, how is Iran a threat to the United States?
Oh my God.
Oh boy. Let me tell you, here's the common sense, simple answer. When someone says death to America, that makes them a threat to America. Nothing else is required to be examined except for that. But you could look at everything else they've done against our allies and also launching attacks on Israel and also sending proxy forces out to harm our troops in the Middle East. And that tells you they are a major threat to the U.S. They hate the U.S. and they want to kill all of us, basically. That's what Iran wants to do, and it's one of the most rogue states. In fact, probably the most rogue state in the Middle East right now, and probably will be for a long time. So they are a huge threat. But, Enforcer, would you like to elaborate on that wonderful question?
Iran, literally, the whole Islamic Republic overthrew the Shah with this whole idea that they were going to kill Americans. Like, they took all of the Americans in the embassy hostage back in 1979 when they took over the country, just because they hated America. Like, that was the thing. Like, since then, they have sponsored terrorist organizations in the Middle East and outside the Middle East to conduct attacks against Israel, to conduct attacks against Saudi Arabia, to conduct attacks against Iraq, against Syria, against Jordan, against anyone in the area, and also against the United Kingdom and the United States specifically. They have been doing that for about 50 years now. They are one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism in the world, and they specifically fund and sponsor terrorist groups that in the end are anti-American and want to kill Americans. They are literally a terrorist nation. There is no way to go, you know, like, how is Iran anti-American? I just don't see it. They literally chant in their national assemblies, death to Israel and death to America. They want everyone in the Western world dead. That makes them an enemy of the United States by default. Not because we want them to be, because they've made themselves an enemy of the Western world by this kind of silliness that they're doing. But I hope that it does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to John Donaldson, who puts in a very generous $25 donation. Hey. And thank you very much, John, for that support. He said, Enforcer Matt, thanks for being you, and I really enjoy your chatter, and thank you. He said, I have to agree with you on Israel's incursion into Syria, and I support Israel generally. And do you know where Russia's Med fleet went?
I don't really know where the Mediterranean fleet went for now. I have a feeling that they're going to have to take the long trip all the way around the Mediterranean and pretty much through the North Sea to make it to a northern Russian base, or maybe to make it to St. Petersburg, which would be a little bit closer. But I really don't know where they're at the moment. But they did pack up and leave. I just don't know how they're going to get back to Russia at the moment, because any trip is really too long for the motorboats to take. But beyond that, I thank you for the support, and I also thank you for agreeing with me. No one has to agree with me. Folks can easily disagree. But at the same time, I, like you, have generally supported everything that the Israelis do, but I'm not a big fan of this right now. It's like I've been really beating the horse on this. It is jumping the gun, in my opinion, and it seems a little bit too brash for what the Western world really is. That's not to say that every offensive action is, and that's not to say that I'm now anti-Israeli and see them as some sort of wicked devils. I still think that the Israelis are pretty good people. We have a lot that watch the channel, and we also have a great deal of coverage and history on this channel of supporting Israeli actions that have been crushing Iranian proxies, which has always been a thing that has been both in Israel's interest and Western interest at large, all the time. But this one right here, I don't really like. Still, Israel is a part of the Western world. They largely work within the pro-Western framework in their region, but nevertheless, this isn't really one of those times. And I would have to say that I would believe that on a diplomatic level, the United States should reach out and tell the Israelis to withdraw back into the DMZ. Totally fine if they militarize the DMZ. I get that. Like, that makes sense. But going forward into Syria and also bombing their military equipment, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If the United States found that to be appropriate, we'd bomb them. And that's how I look at it. Because if y'all remember, the U.S. CENTCOM flew into Syria, and we bombed, I believe it was like 60 ISIS camps out in the middle of the desert. And then Israel flies in, and then they bomb 250 Syrian military targets. If we consider the Syrian rebels to be a threat here in the United States, we would have bombed them. But we didn't, because we see that they're actually trying to work on maybe becoming a Western-aligned country, and we should give them the chance to be able to do something like that. And if they don't, then we'll deal with that. But we still got to wait and see if they'll come to our side. And if they don't, what have we lost? Like, if you're going to bomb them now and turn them into our enemy, why not just give them some time? If they're going to end up being our enemy anyways, why not at least give them the chance to turn into a Western ally, possibly, instead of immediately throwing the opportunity away and then making them an enemy regardless? So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right. So I asked the bot this question, by the way, because I'm pretty sure they're a bot at this point. The one who asked about what has Iran done to be a threat to America. I asked them, are you chasing that Iranian bag? How much does the Ayatollah pay you to come out here and do this? And he said, I would throw insults too if I came up with that garbage explanation. It was not even an insult, though. I was like legitimately asking, like, how much are they paying you? Like, how much is the Iranian bag at this point? Because I would like to know, because like I've literally heard nobody ever in my life argue that Iran is not a threat to the United States. Pretty much everybody agrees with that, regardless of what political background you come from. Everybody knows that Iran's a threat. Mostly. Actually, I'm going to take that back for a second, because actually there is a small group out there that thinks Iran's not a threat, but I won't go there. But Enforcer, would you like to add in?
Iran, there's not really a lot to add. Iran literally hates the United States. It's a national prerogative of theirs. Let me just go find the official Iranian stance on the United States. Let's see here. Here we go. So this is the official statement. Let's see here. This is the official statement of the Iranian government that has been quoted on Twitter. The natural and unavoidable conflict between the Islamic system and such oppressive powers as the United States, which is trying to establish a global dictatorship and further its own interests by dominating other nations and trampling on their rights. That's what they say about us. So they hate us by nature. That's literally what they think about us. And for that reason, we really don't have a choice in saying they're an enemy of the United States, because they make us their enemy. So by default, they are our enemy for this reason. But anyways, hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Boulder Boy, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Boulder Boy. He said, thanks, Enforcers, for what you do, and Taipei.
And thank you so much, Boulder Boy, for enjoying what we do, and thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And of course, Taipei, I see you watched the video till its end today, and so thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to the bot is still going on about the Iranian thing. I'm watching intently here, but our next super chat goes to John McKinnon, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, John, for that support. He said, "Please don't scrap my Bayraktar jam from the intro, LOL. And also, Enforcer, do you think the U.S. should help free those poor 100,000 Syrian prisoners from that horrific underground dungeon prison? Just awful."
It is horrendous. It is pretty much a camp out there, like a concentration camp, literally, at Syria prison here. I would say yes. Like, I very rarely ever work on a humanitarian level. I usually like to work on a more pragmatic and calculated level with what the United States does or our actions around the world. But in the particular instance of Syria, I think it is time for us to try and extend a humanitarian hand and help out with trying to release those prisoners immediately. It is an urgent matter because from what we understand, the entire prison that they're trying to liberate is underground, and there is no ventilation that's currently active down there, so they're going to start suffocating. So I would like to see that the U.S. could possibly extend humanitarian bit of assistance to the Syrian interim government in helping getting these prisoners out. It's a horrendous thing, and I think that should be, well, these people's suffering should be ended as soon as possible with their release. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much once again for support. Thank you for enjoying the channel, and thank you for asking that question, because that is one of the few things I would say we do need to help out with on a humanitarian level is releasing those prisoners. Because if y'all saw all of the clips that were coming out on Twitter of that prison, it was one of the worst places. It was as bad as you would imagine a concentration camp in Nazi Germany to look like. And with that, we are on to the next one.
It really was bad. Like I'll be honest, like I've seen the war footage coming out of Ukraine. I've seen it coming out of the Middle East. And I've even seen some of the really bad instances happening with the POWs on each side of the war in the Ukraine war. Nothing has rivaled what I've seen coming out of that prison right there. Like probably by far the most gruesome and sick atrocities I've ever seen in my entire life have been coming out of that Syrian prison. And it's stuff that you hear about in the books about Nazi Germany. You hear about the concentration camps doing things just like that. And in fact, I saw things that I hadn't even heard of before about the concentration camps happening at this Syria prison, the secretive prison. And it just shows you like how really sick the Assad regime really was. It was the sickest to no extent. Like it really was that way. But also, I'm running a poll here. It says, does the secretive Syrian Syria prison rival Auschwitz for the level of atrocities witnessed, if you've seen them on Twitter? And 67% said yes, and 33% said no. And I gotta say, it was that sick. Like, it really does rival the notorious Auschwitz camp. It rivals it for sure. It's just the depravity and sickness like we've never seen before. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it doesn't. It completely compares to a concentration camp, a gulag, or the killing fields in Cambodia under Pol Pot. It is a place of despair. It's a place of great agony. You could tell by the people who were coming out of that place that they had seen horrors beyond comprehension for decades as they were pretty much sitting there rotting away inside of this prison. It was a terrible place. It was horrendous. I can't even say how bad it was. It was awful. Like, it really was. And I don't think that there will ever be such a horrendous place as that in Syria again. I like, not because the barbarity will not continue. Barbarity will always continue. It's really a part of humanity for the large part that there will be some form of barbarism, but I just don't think you can even get it down to that kind of a depraved level that it was, because it was bad. That's all I can say. We can't really even say a lot. And also, Matthew, I did see that we're apparently now satin cloth.
I'm a textile now, like on commodity.
Man, man, I'm telling you what. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Danny B, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Danny, for that $20 support. And it's good to see you once again. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. And I was watching a documentary about the city of Odessa in Ukraine, and they were saying that there is hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath the city."
And I believe that is true. I believe there were some mines that were built at Odessa at a time, but Odessa is also a major port as well. But there are always a load of tunnels that are forgotten under most cities, and I'm not really sure the actual purpose of Odessa's tunnels. I would assume it was probably a mining operation that was in the area, although mining this close to the ocean usually causes some issues with flooding inside the tunnels. But nevertheless, there are tunnels in some cities in America that were really interesting as well. But beyond that, let me go see the Odessa tunnels. Let me see if I can find something about them. Let's see here. It's yeah, it was a result of stone mining, but these did end up becoming the catacombs of the city. Although I do not believe that any corpses were stored inside this catacomb. So let's see. Let's see, banned within the Central Park of Odessa. Let's see, during World War II, it served for partisans. Let's see. Hang on. Okay, so yeah, it's not used to store bodies. It's just a whole bunch of tunnels that were a part of a stone mine. During the Russian Revolution, during the Russian Civil War, they actually banned stone mining in the Central Park in Odessa. So apparently in the Central Park, somewhere in the city, there was a stone mine, and they just mined stone out of the Central Park. So that was an interesting moment in time, I'm sure. But this is what it generally looks like inside. But that's very interesting. It was stone mining, though. I believe that the catacombs under Paris were also made with similar purpose. They were also mines as well, but the Paris catacombs are not even mapped completely because those are so extensive and span for hundreds of miles under the city in every direction, sometimes taking completely erratic turns, that it's really impossible to map it properly. And also some of the actual paths have been closed off due to cave-ins, which pretty much shut off the rest of the course of the tunnel. But beyond that, I thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know specifically about the Odessa catacombs, but usually all catacombs in general were created from early mining operations in the city's early histories, usually in most places around the world. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Leora Abigail, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Leora, for that support once again. And Leora says, there were certain rebel groups that threatened on video recently to march on Jerusalem. And I think Israel's concerned about its security after everything they've been dealing with. And now they have to deal with that threat.
And I thank you for the support, Leora. And certain rebel groups, sometimes people just say stuff. That's why, you know, like, I don't really put that much stock into what some people say that are part of organizations. Like, for example, we just heard that apparently someone who has a friend that is a soldier in the IDF says that according to the Torah, they claim everything south of Damascus and they're going to get it. And, you know, that's just, like, the honest truth is that's just some guy in the IDF. And that doesn't mean that the Israelis are now some sort of, like, domineering, invading force that's going to take over southern Syria. It's just the beliefs of some guy. And I've heard of those. I haven't seen the clips myself, but that may have just been a couple of guys with a pickup truck and an AK somewhere in the middle of Syria who, you know, said some stuff like that, and you really can't take that for much. You know, it's kind of like saying, oh, look, you know, like, this is a pretty good one. This one's been used in Ukraine and Russia a lot. Oh, look, someone might be a Nazi in the Russian or / Ukrainian military. Oh my God, the whole military's Nazi. Like, there are extremists who will, you know, end up joining the military. There are extremists who are in the U.S. military right now. Whether they'll be found or not, they generally don't allow extremists to join the army, but that doesn't, well, the U.S. military, but that doesn't stop them sometimes. They'll still end up joining and try and, you know, hide it or keep it hidden. But you know, there's extremists in every military in the world. There's always bad eggs. There's bad cops, bad politicians, bad librarians. There are just terrible people out there. You know, of course, there's not a lot of them. They're kind of just the bad eggs, the few and far in between. But you know, that's largely what I think these people are. I don't think they're the actual representatives or leaders of these groups. They're just kind of, you know, folks who are just saying some stuff out there, and then people, you know, really blow it out of proportion. It's kind of like when, you know, a supporter of a domestic political party here in America, you know, just some random Joe Blow, makes a comment, and then people want to start acting like that's the official, like, rhetoric point of the party. It's not. Like, that's just some random guy out there running his mouth, and he's probably crazy or something like that, and he doesn't really represent the larger part of the population. So That's how I would address it. And also, if you want to send us the link, you sure can, over on Twitter, and I will try and take a look at it and see what it looks like. Because if it looks like just a couple of guys in a pickup truck, then it means absolutely nothing, most likely. If it's the head of the HTS, which I forgot his name, then that would be a pretty serious thing, and that may be a reason why Israel was concerned about it. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Neiman Bauer, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Neiman, as well. He said, the problem is that Syria's hardcore religious people will rise up like in Afghanistan. And when Syria is stabilized, the hardcore religion will take over again, and the anti-Western brainwashing will continue, and the past will repeat.
I thank you for the support, but that I do not believe has happened in Iraq or Jordan or Saudi Arabia or anywhere else in the region, unless if the Iranians were directly involved in paying those people to do that, like they did in Lebanon or in Gaza or down in Yemen. Generally, most of these like, I don't know if you know the origin of the Syrian Civil War, but the Syrian Civil War started because everyone was tired of living under a government like that, and they wanted to be free. And so they started an open revolt against Bashar al-Assad because they wanted a secular democratic government that wasn't some sort of a Islamic dictatorial regime. So with that in mind, I see where you're coming from with that, but that just really isn't the case on the ground. I mean, the HTS may have been a group like that, but I think most Syrian people aren't really backing that up or behind that much, to be entirely honest. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see, because that's generally what the whole Civil War was about, was people were tired of living under something like that. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here is going to go to Alfie, who puts in a 15, and that's a second support of the night. And huge shout out to Alfie for supporting us a very big league tonight. He said, do we know if the U.S. and Taiwanese governments have a plan for the semiconductors industry if the Chinese invade? Will they blow up the whole industry? And go LSA and like the stream.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting. Long live the LSA. And to answer your question, TSMC just plans on blowing itself up if Taiwan gets invaded. That's really it's not even a contingency plan. It's just screw everyone over at that point, including the Chinese, by blowing it up. But generally at the moment, the United States is currently kind of moving TSMC into the United States, so that way the chip manufacturing is done inside the Western world, and the Western world will retain pretty much permanent control over semiconductor manufacturing well on into the future. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I do have to make a quick comment. Please, no religion in the chat. We say no politics. I don't know what it is, but the whole Middle Eastern thing always brings up people from every single side who are bringing out like religious scriptures and stuff like that to justify something. And I'll be honest with you, like like regardless from whatever side it's coming from, that's no way to run a government. You know, like, I'm just saying, like, you know, like, we can't go, well, you know, because on top of that, this is a pro-American channel, so I'm not going to act like the United States has a preference, you know, because I'm generally saying, what should America do in the world? America doesn't recognize an official religion, so who in the world will we go into Syria and back up their religious beliefs with? The Muslims, the Christians, or the Jews? And that would be violating the First Amendment and the freedom of expression, because then we'd be clearly moving forward in the world, supporting and promoting an official religion at that point, because we'd have to pick a side and turn this thing into a holy war. That wouldn't make any sense on an American level. And also, that's not how you run a government, is by saying, well, you know, this and that says this. Like, you know, I'm seeing some people, I'm literally seeing stuff from all sides. We don't talk about that here on this channel. And also on top of that, that's not at all how governance works for the large part, especially here in the United States. Or at least that's not how it's supposed to work. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Lord Lathos LSA, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Lord Lathos. They said, long live the LSA and spam folks. We have the best spam, only the best.
And thank you so much for the support. And spam is the greatest. We have the finest spam and the greatest spam in the world, because spam is made here in the United States of America. American workers harvest American pigs to create that American spam. And that American spam is delicious spam, and people love spam all over the world. Spamity spam, spam, spam. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Knack, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Knack, for that support. He said, we have to consider China's current economic standing as well. Their economy is not doing well, and this leads me to believe they are more inclined to start this war. And we know war is good for recessions.
And it is good for recession. It's not really good in the long run, but that certainly should be or could be a motivator for the Chinese. Because usually political, well, not really political, but economic instability does lead to rash external actions by countries that maybe trying to find some way to stabilize the situation or at least focus everything on a short-term objective like a war. And so with that, thank you once again for support. That's a very good observation, by the way, and certainly a major motivator possibly for the Chinese. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nick, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support. He said, I read that there are discussions about Ukraine president stepping down and being exiled to Britain in return for peace. Also, I read incoming POTUS considering U.S. pulling out of NATO. Thoughts?
I've never heard of Zelensky going into exile. I've never even heard that being seriously considered. And also, the United States is never going to be pulling out of NATO. That's really just a whole bunch of hype talk and bravado, to be entirely honest. America's not leaving NATO. Let's see. What's the best way to say on that? The things y'all hear being stated by people is completely different than what's going on behind the scenes right now. A lot of people heard that America was just going to leave Ukraine high and dry and let the Russians win. And then after the election was over, now we're hearing that apparently Ukraine's going to be supported possibly even more, according to Zelensky, after the fact, and that the war will continue until it reaches an amicable end. So I would generally have to say I have not been hearing those two things at all. In fact, it seems the complete contrary to both of those. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Eason, who puts in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, Eason, for that support. He said, YouTube won't let me speak my mind on Syria, but I'm sending you the LSA regardless. And sadly, I can't read the last part because we are conflicted. But, Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Eason, and we can't read the last part or the kneecaps come off, like at least for us. But I do thank you so much for the support, and thank you for helping out the LSA and keeping this channel running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it rolling. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bartimaeus Aurelius, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much. They said, last time I checked, there were roughly 3 to 4 different rebel groups in Syria. I believe it's naive to believe the new government automatically controls all of Syria. Israel wasn't taking any chances.
I wouldn't say it's naive. I think we've had this conversation before with someone else. It's kind of rude to say something's naive. Maybe saying it's a little silly, that's even kind of getting on the line there, and I do that a couple of times. But saying that something's naive doesn't really make a lot of sense, you see, because really, interim governments have usually been made up of multiple different factions. I don't think you realize this, but maybe you're a little naive. The United States government is currently made up of 2 different political parties. It's not exactly a homogenous bloc either, but yet the United States continues to function. It's not a whole government. Hell, let's go look at the British Parliament really quickly, because I'm pretty sure that they're not a homogenous bloc of a uniparty either. So let's see. Parliament of the UK. Do we have the current seat arrangement here? We sure as hell do. So, let's see. Is this the current seat structure? That's the House of Lords. We want the House of Commons. So here we go. All right, so in the current House of Commons, you have the Labour Party as the main party. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You have 14 different parties in the British Parliament right now. Now, if we were to say that...
Also, Dodgy Dave.
Dodgy Dave, dodgy. So if we were to say that because there are different factions inside of a government, whether it be interim or not, that government's unstable and they lack control, that means that Britain doesn't control hardly a piece of the UK because there's 14 different political parties, and in America there's 2. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to say that Oh, well, because it's made up of multiple different factions, which seems kind of democratic, honestly. It can't be stable. They can't be in control of everything. Sure, they can. They already are largely in control of everything. They just took it over a couple of days ago and actually moved through a lot of these towns. There is some sort of a presence there, usually of a civil administration still, that is working under the interim government. So that's largely what I'd have to say. I mean, like I believe that it's a little naive to make it sound as though only one group can run a country. That's a dictatorship at that point of only one group, like say the Syrian Free Army took over all of Syria and then created a interim government and it only had the representatives of the Syrian Free Army and only one kind of thinking in it. That would be a uniparty system, and that largely would end up turning into a dictatorship. So I hope that addresses that well for you, because if that's the case, if that is the case, Israel shouldn't take any chances, and they ought to bomb the UK, because who knows what party could take charge of the United Kingdom. Hell, if they even have control of the country, having 14 parties. And of course, that's being said sarcastically, because the United Kingdom is a Western ally, and if the Israelis did that, I think I'd pick the British over the Israelis any day. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to AU Alex Stanfield, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Alex, for that support. He said, have y'all looked in the population decline of Russia and China? They literally won't have soldiers to send in the next decade or two, and most countries have declining populations.
And I thank you for the support, and that's true. Most countries actually do have declining populations these days. And let me see, China population. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. India's is actually skyrocketing, but China's is actually starting to decline, and Russia's really is starting to decline because of the massive losses they took in World War I and World War II. So let me go get that really quickly. There we go. Russia's is actually starting to decline a little bit. Ukraine's is as well, interestingly enough. But nevertheless, moving on from that, it is a bit of an issue for a lot of countries. The United States is one of the countries that still has population growth, but it's an interesting thing, not to get into it too much, but there was an idea that was put forward by I believe it was a philosopher called Malthus, who believed in the 1700s in Britain that eventually the population will grow so big that there just will not be enough resources on the planet left for them to live, and then the population will rapidly dwindle and decline until it ceases to exist, pretty much the end of humanity. And that's called a Malthusian principle. And largely, Malthusian principles have never been proven true throughout all of history up until now. And it does finally appear that once a perfect environment exists and world populations skyrocket rapidly, eventually there's some sort of a discontent, or, due to Russia's situation, a massive amount of losses, that start to really turn people away from having children, and then they end up actually having a negative birth rate, and the population begins to decline. And that's actually a very...
It's called not being able to make enough money to support children, probably, because it's becoming unaffordable to have children these days.
Yeah, that's kind of true as well, really in a lot of countries, including Russia. It's crazy to think that, but this is what the world population has looked like over history. Hasn't really grown a lot, usually over most of the centuries. The first agricultural revolution that happened in the 1600s really helped the population to double in size, but it was really the agricultural and industrial revolution of the 19th century that really led to world population skyrocketing. There's more people alive now than there ever was on the face of the planet in history, so it's a little weird to think about that, but eventually this is going to start to decline, and it's going to start dropping off a pretty significant bit, because I believe at this point we may have entered a little bit of a Malthusian principle, or the Malthusian theory, to where the population has climbed so heavily, there's just not enough resources at this point anymore, and so generally, naturally, the population is going to stabilize itself or start to decline, one or the other. It's a little unfortunate to think about that, but generally, with the introduction of AI and such things, resource availability will still, of course, exist. It's just that there will be a much smaller amount of people left, and that's kind of sad to think about, because we made it so far and made so much progress on having so many people on the planet at the same time, and now it appears that we may have done that a little too good, too fast. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address it the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And it goes to Neil Vizanon, who puts in a 10. And Neil says, has someone in DC figured out how to use stealth planes for supply drops yet? I think that could help them arm it into fly blockades, that is. And number 1 from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support. And I would pull up the marmot, but I think we're starting to run out of time. And Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
We have about 10 left.
So we are kind of running out of time, sadly. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I do have to say that maybe a stealth aircraft would help with that, but stealth transports would be a very costly kind of a transport. Maybe you could do it with a B-2, though. I think you could certainly do it with a B-2, but would that be a justified use of one? That would be a question for the number crunchers up at the DoD. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here, also, by the way, he asked for a live chat, so we will get that live chat. This one goes to Steve McKinnon. He said, if Belarus launches a nuke, does the response go to Belarus, even though Russia may have pulled the string?
Yes, the response would go to Belarus, because by direct action, there really is no way for us to tie the Russians to it, because if the Belarusians claim it's our nuke and then they launch that nuke, we nuke Belarus. If the Russians started to retaliate and started launching their own nukes in response, then we would launch at them too, because they may believe that we're attacking them and then launch theirs defensively, although we weren't hitting them, we were hitting Belarus. But I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, Eason puts in their second support of the night, a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Eason. They're coming in with a hot take. They said Turkey should be kicked out of NATO.
I think it's getting kind of close to that on most instances. I honestly would have to agree a little bit right now with the Turkish stance on Syria, but still, they largely work against the West, and regardless whether at this moment I kind of agree more with the Turks than the Israelis, usually I agree with the Israelis far more than the Turks, they still do so many anti-Western actions. Their loyalty to the Western and American sphere is questionable, and I believe that that's an action that should be seriously considered by all involved. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Danny B, who puts in a 10 once again, and huge shout out to Chef Danny. He said, Chef Danny here as always, and these bots are crazy. I just want to let y'all know my new catering business is going pretty well in LSA. And also, I'm glad to hear that, Danny. He did tell me that last time that he did start that new catering business. I'm very glad to hear it's going well because that food looked delish. I want some. But Enforcer, what say you?
And it's good to hear that the catering business is doing well, Danny B. And I got to say that that's a wonderful thing to hear. And also, thank you so much for the support. And yeah, the bots have been crazy tonight. I've seen a couple of them coming in, and they'll have insane takes. Like one thing that is stupid, is like we were talking about, hey, I don't really think we like what Israel is doing in Syria, although we've agreed with everything they've done in the past. And so then someone decided to take the moment, and this is one, I just want y'all to know this. Whenever I see this specific thing brought up about Israel, I just generally know that this is not a person with good or honest intentions. They always bring up the USS Liberty incident, and every time I see that, I'm like, oh, there we go. We got an extremist popping up. I'm like, I don't know what's up with these people. I don't know why in the world they're like that, but they will always sit there, whenever you say anything where you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't really think Israel's action is that good. Some person like that always pops up, and they always have the most heinous and insane things to say about the Israelis, and it's that's just I disagree with what they're doing in Syria. I'm not acting like Israel is now the devil. It's I just don't like what they're doing there, and I think it's not in our interests. So it doesn't mean I hate them now. It just means I disagree with their actions in this one particular scenario. Not all of them, or anything like that. I don't know how people work like that, me personally. I feel like it's really easy for me to agree with some things that are done, disagree with others. I don't feel like you have to be all for or against something, but I don't know how some people work that way where they have to be all for something or all against something. It's just a really weird way to work, in my opinion. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Claxon, who puts in a 5, along with Plazoth, as well as Mark Andre Burnett, and huge shout out to Plazoth, Mark, and also, of course, Claxon for that support and supporting our channel and helping it to keep on running. And there's no comments to address on any 3 of those, but we also have a $10 super chat from Alfie. He said, 8,000 watching, at least let's get 2,500 likes, and also can we get some LSA in the chat and like the stream?
Hey, I'm putting LSA in the chat if you're still here, the 4,700 of y'all that are still here. And we actually got up to 8.8 thousand people at the peak. That was pretty impressive, and I got to thank everyone for watching tonight. And also, we did get over 2.5 thousand likes. We're about to 2.8 thousand. And I got to thank you so much for the support and wanting folks to like this channel and enjoy it, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And so, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Born in Ukraine, who puts in a 5 and says, is there an update on Russian naval ships at the Syrian coast, and where would they relocate, and can they make it to the port of Novorossiysk? And thanks to the LSA.
They could never make it to the port of Novorossiysk. Great question, though. The Bosphorus and the Dardanelles are closed off to Russian naval traffic, so the motorboat fleet will not be able to travel through that area to the Black Sea to make it to Novorossiysk. From what we know, they broke into open water, but their exact locations are unclear. We do believe that they're currently traveling westbound through the Mediterranean and will most likely be trying to transit their way up towards St. Petersburg, which would be the nearest open and available Russian port that they could try and moor in. There may also be another more funny option. St. Petersburg and all of the northern ports are currently frozen over. So with that in mind, they might not be able to go anywhere because all of the ports that they actually have access to are frozen over right now. And the only ones that are not are Novorossiysk and Sevastopol, which currently they cannot get to because of the closure of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. So I hope that addresses that fairly well and gives a bit of an answer to that, but we really don't know where they are or where they're heading at this time. Still, thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Warren Zasquatch, who puts in a 5 and says, I'm still watching every night, and it looks like CDN guns are headed to Ukraine.
And thank you for the support. And I don't know a lot about those guns, but hopefully they help them out a great deal. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that has addressed it well. And thank you for still watching every single night. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Greg Carmen, who just put in a 10, and huge shout out to you, Greg, for the support. He said, lasers. LSA.
And lasers. And I got to thank you so much for the support, Greg Carmen. And laser weaponry is really starting to take off these days. I can't wait to see how it actually works in the future and how fleshed out and how advanced it gets, because I am really excited for what laser technology is going to be bringing to the field. Ballistic computers don't even really have to do that much more computations anymore to really lead the target as far as the ballistic computations, because the speed of light is quite literally as fast as a weapon can shoot. So hopefully these weapon systems will be the future of air defense and maybe even some other forms of defense on the ground. Of course, we can't use them against personnel. That's a war crime. But still, I hope that does address it the best I can. Thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bald Thanos, who puts in a 2 and says, GTA 5, Pavel is the worst spy of all time.
Matthew, do you know about Pavel?
I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of Pavel. I've played GTA quite a bit, so I'm not really sure.
I've never heard of Pavel, but I do thank you for the support. I guess he's the worst spy ever because I've never heard of him. Well, I guess that's a good spy then because you've never heard of him. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that addresses that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to a boy who puts in a 2 and says, China paid Putin and Iran to attack neighbors for this.
I honestly don't think Russia has enough money to pay the Chinese. I mean, they're broke. It's like they're legitimately broke. Maybe they did. I would doubt it, though, because they would be bankrupt at this point. But still, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, let's see here. Let's see. I saw Kachulian say something interesting. He said, my plan was wife, kids, and a house with a job now. I have an apartment. That's about it. I'll be honest with you. Well, I'm not going to get political with this, but the economic outlook is a little bleak, and especially if you're young like us, even though, you try to be optimistic, the economic thing is not looking that bright. So hopefully it does change eventually because, like I said earlier, it's becoming unaffordable to have kids. It's becoming unaffordable to buy a house. So, when you start losing all those things, it's like, you don't really have like that quote unquote dream anymore that people talked about. But maybe it'll change. I'm optimistic. But anyways, someone mentioned it was Knox Day. They said, can you address the poll that's currently running? And we shall. It's almost evenly split. The question says, do you think the USA will experience a military draft in the next 5 years? 45% said no, and 40% said yes. And honestly, on this one, I'm a little bit undecided. I'm going to have to cop out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I'm unsure as well. You just can never tell these days. And also, I'm about to say this, man, that you know what's going to happen, man. Is that you said, the economy isn't really that great. And I honestly would have to say it's probably not going to get better either, at least for our generation. It seems as though things are just kind of set in stone for us with how things are going. And someone's about to come in, Matthew, and go, no, you don't even know. You're naive and stupid. Like we haven't looked at the price of houses lately or anything like that, and seen that they're completely unaffordable. They're like $1 million. And it's like, the people will be like, no, the economy's fine. You can have a kid and buy a house. It's like, no, you can't. It's like they're literally unaffordable. It's just lease and that's it. Like, you can't do anything else than rent or lease these days, because beyond that, it's just unaffordable. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Mike Keywood, who puts in a 2 and says, how do this week's events affect the war in Ukraine?
This week's events don't really affect the war in Ukraine too much because any of the Russian equipment that is returning is so minimal in value and firepower that it really wouldn't change much on the ground for the Ukrainians. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to JXSXRX, who puts in 2 and says, can you get a question from the chat? And yes, we can. You're actually going to bring us right into the question segment here. And thank you for that support. So moving into our live chats here, we have our first one, which is the Morse code decoders of the stream. And it is Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse for tonight says, the world is very chaotic these days. At this point, want a smoothie, LLT, LOSA. Taiwan situation is concerning.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that Morse code message correct. It really is impressive to know that y'all continue to get that thing down on the nail. Do you want a smoothie? I do too. But still, thank you once again for deciphering that Morse code message. And with that, it appears that we are about to run overtime. And so we are going to get on this super chat right here from Ryan H., read it out aloud, and then we're going to move on to the last 3 questions of the night.
All right, so this super chat goes to Ryan H., who puts in a 5. He said, I read that Cyprus is considering NATO membership in the future. What if Turkey doesn't recognize Cyprus as a country? Is it even feasible?
No, because the ascension of a new NATO member requires the unanimous agreement amongst all current NATO members for a new one to join. Cyprus is not recognized, I believe, as a legitimate country by the Republic of Turkey, and for this reason, Turkey would never relent. Because that also means that they would have illegally invaded Cyprus, because northern Cyprus is actually a Turkish puppet state. And that's why there's this giant little dashed line through the middle of Syria. Well, not Syria, Cyprus, because that's no man's land in a UN, I believe, partition zone in between Cyprus and northern Cyprus. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one is sort of on the same topic we were talking about earlier. I saw Melanie16040 say in the live chat, if someone thinks you guys don't know what the house prices are like, then tell them to listen to all the people who say there is no way they could buy their own house today. And that's the point I'd like to make as well. And interestingly enough, you know, way back in the day, let's say you've been living in the same house for like 20 years or something like that. That house is appreciated so much that you could turn around and sell that house for probably like 3 or 4 times what you bought it for 20 years ago. Like, no lie. And, you know, the people that are selling the house at that inflated value are the same ones telling young people these days, oh, you just don't work hard enough or something like that to afford the house. That's not true. It's not true at all. The wages have not kept up with the house prices. They're way beyond what the house prices are at this point. So it's just crazy. Like all the house price situation is out of whack. Everything seems like it's out of whack these days. And it's not just the U.S. that's out of whack. It's everybody just out of whack. So really wild. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, it's literally the whole world. China's having problems with it. Russia's having problems with it. Everyone in Europe's having problems with it. We're having problems with it. It's nothing that has to do with the failure of the West or anything like that. And I saw some folks saying, oh, it seems as though the West doesn't want anyone to privately own anything. No, it's not that at all. They do want people to privately own stuff because economic activity, you know, and private ownership generally is good, at least for the economy and for the government and such things. It's just that there's either a lack of resources out there, really it's a lack of housing, or it is just general mismanagement, and that's what's creating the issue. That's really what it is. It's never like people always want to ascribe something to a grand conspiracy theory that this is all a plan. It's not a plan. This is either just happening or it is a complete failure from ineptitude. But generally what I would say is that there needs to be a fix to the problem. I think everyone's realizing that, especially here in America. The house prices need to somehow come down, and the income of average Americans needs to rise. hopefully we can meet it in the middle. So it's not all about just, raising people's wages to match the price of houses, and it's not about bringing the houses down to match the income of an American and make it affordable. It's about meeting halfway, so bringing the wages up and also bringing the price of houses down. You could easily do that by encouraging, through categorical and block grants to the states, incentivizing them to allow more zoning for either high-density residential housing or low-density residential housing, or really a mix of the both. Maybe even try and create mixed commercial residential zoning, or really encourage that on a federal level through the block and categorical grants. So that way you could see that not only are commercial buildings being built, but the space isn't being wasted, and built on top of that are residential apartments, or maybe even well, really just apartments that you could purchase to own. That would probably do a great deal to help out with the housing situation in this country and the general unaffordability of it, and also trying to find a way to either create more productive and more high-paying jobs in the nation, which is kind of tough because we already have some of the highest-paying jobs in the world, or we could try and figure a way to generally raise the average income to be able to more so meet in the middle with the lowering of the price of the housing due to the higher supply. That's
I think another problem is this: is you have these companies out there that are building homes, and they're publicly traded on the stock market. So their main concern is raising money for the investors, raising the stock price. That's their main concern. So when you have these new houses being built and a very low supply of houses that were already existing, the new buyers are forced into these new homes that the corporations are jacking the prices up on, like way beyond belief. Like, for example, if it costs $100,000 to build one of these homes that the corporations are building, they'll set the price at like $700,000 or $800,000 and make a killing of a profit on one single house, just because it's that greed that drives the entire corporation system. And that is what's currently also causing the house prices to go skyrocketing, is that.
It really is, but one way, this is going to sound a little extreme to folks, and it is kind of extreme, but one way to fix that is that the federal government or state governments could start to pass legislation that caps the price on houses, and says that there is a certain minimum that can be achieved, and there's a certain maximum that can be achieved as well, to try and create a more reasonable situation for the American buyer that's buying these houses. I think that might fix the situation. It's a little rash because it's quite literally the government coming in and price fixing and creating a price ceiling and a price floor, but we've done that before. We've done that in the milk industry, and we've also done that in a couple of other industries as well here in the United States. But if we have to start doing that for housing just to try and level off the situation and make it reasonable, I think we're going to have to do that, because otherwise it looks like the situation will generally continue to spiral out of control. And if it continues to spiral out of control, that will end up being a negative for the economy overall.
I would agree.
And that took a long time, man. The lag is starting to hit again.
I was trying to go for that. You know that one video of Albert Einstein talking? It was literally, he was sitting down at a table, and this guy across from him was reading off a paper about some activism or something like that. He was reading it off to Albert Einstein to get his agreement on it. He read the whole paper about, we the scientists feel this way. And Albert Einstein said, I agree.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, now that you said that like that, I was like, I saw that, man. I have seen that. But with that,
Yeah, it was in color too. Like, the first time I've ever heard Einstein speak was in that video.
really,
Yeah, like, there's not much footage of him talking, actually.
man, he was actually obsessed with like a let's see, it was a children's show. It was like Time for Beanie or something like that. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. He seemed a little quirky, though.
Apparently, in the middle of a very serious meeting of other like mathematicians, including himself, he literally just got up and said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, it's time for Beanie," and he just walked out and then went to like the nearest TV and just watched Time for Beanie. I was like, "The hell?"
Hey, look, you get to have time for Beanie. You got plenty of time for Beanie when you're as smart as Einstein was. We can figure out stuff. He's like, I literally came up with the equation for relativity. I can go watch Beanie.
Man, he's like, I may come up with the theory of relativity, but man, Beanie's deep. Like he's like sitting there, he's like seriously considering the moral dilemmas of Time for Beanie. But anyways, with that, I hope we had a fun time with that. I had a fun time with that for sure. And also, I see a lot of people talking about all kinds of stuff. Einstein and let's see here. Some people are saying capitalism rush. Capitalism is a great system. It is the best economic system that exists because it encourages competition, and competition is a very healthy thing for an economy. The problem is, though, is that nowadays we generally see, especially on the kind of scales that we're working with now, that there has to be some regulation a little bit to make sure that things stay fair and people aren't getting trampled. It's kind of been like that for at least a century now. So with that in mind, I think we need to start coming in and possibly begin to regulate real estate on a federal level, or not really a federal level, but really leave it to the states to figure out their own creative ways to try and find a way to regulate the real estate industry so that way houses that come onto the market are not so cheap that the people who are selling them aren't making a profit, but they're not so expensive that people are getting ripped off every single time they try and go and buy a house. That probably would be the best thing to try and figure out, and also at the same time to try and see if we can make Americans or citizens of the Republic a little bit more prosperous, so that way they can afford these houses, even if we can't get the price all the way down to the ideal point. But anyways, with that, we are on to the second last question of the night.
And this one goes to JR Does Stuff, who says, I saw on your favorite news channel, CNN, where they showed one of Assad's garages filled with super expensive cars. It was incredible. And it was quite a car collection, I will say. He had several Ferraris, he had a Rolls Royce, he had a Mercedes, the SLR, he had all kinds of rare cars down there. While across town, the worst atrocities seen since Auschwitz were taking place literally in the basement. That was one sick bastard. But Enforcer, what say you?
That was a sick guy for sure. He did have an interesting car collection, though. That's one thing that can be said. But, even Hitler and I think Mao, well, not Mao, Mao actually kind of like kept things bare minimum, but I think even Stalin had a pretty interesting car collection for what the Soviet Union had. But still sick people all the way around. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Ghost of Kiev, who said, do you think the U.S. would ever give Ukraine the new F-15EX in the future?
No, that's a national security interest and a concern, actually. If we gave them that, we're giving away some of our national secrets that took billions of dollars to produce and really is proprietary technology at the moment that gives us a fighting edge over everyone that we may go against. We got to keep our best technological secrets to ourselves to ensure our own national security in the long run. So I don't think that we would ever give them an F-15EX. I just don't ever think that that would happen. And so with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much once again for watching tonight's stream. Even with the lag, somehow we upgraded the RAM and it still didn't really fix the problem, so on to plan B. New computer. But I still thank you all so much once again for watching, and if y'all did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We love to know that people are enjoying this channel and watching it, and surprisingly enough, let me make sure on this. Let me doubly make sure. Long-lastingly make sure. We have 327,860 subscribers here at this moment. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching the stream. And if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Link in the description below. I'm doing the video outro now. I'm brainwashed now to do that. But still, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukrainian, long live the Leaf Spring Army, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, and take care.
And I agree. And with that, folks, we'll see you all tomorrow on the Short War video, and also the nightly war news stream as well. So once again, thank you all for another great stream tonight, and Slava Ukraine, Herum Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Есть.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
White and gold Настане час.